Right. Well, welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Nevada County Camera Club. If I haven't met you, I'm Rachel Rosenthal. I'm the president of the club for this year. I hear beeping. So we're generally leaving people unmuted. That's a good example. But if there are issues, Kathy and I are watching. Kathy's our vice president, watching the participant list, and we may mute you if needed, but hopefully not. All right. All right, so what we're going to do tonight is we've got announcements, which I'm going to do, and some of our club members are going to share some information with you. Then we'll go to our presentation and our speaker who's here with us already, Karin Rosenthal. The joke is we're no relation. Welcome, Karin, who's joining us from Boston tonight. And we'll have her presentation, and then we'll take a short intermission, maybe about 5 minutes, let you stretch your legs, get some munchies, whatever you'd like to do. We'll come back after the intermission, and then we'll announce the winners of January's best of for each of the photo categories. And then we'll do the critique. And tonight our judges are Chris Schiller and Douglas Hooper. So, all right, so that's a plan for the evening. So circling back to announcements. All right, so we are recording, as I said. So if there are any distractions or something, Kathy and I may mute you as needed. And then as I move to the photo categories, there's been a lot of discussion. The board announced a few weeks ago that we did make some minor changes to the photo categories for 2021. Just to make sure everybody knows, we did add back in the non-critiqued category as category number 15. And we'll track that this year to see how many people elect to use that category. And then on the website itself, if you go in and look down that log in and go down and look down the right-hand set of links, under meeting videos, it's been terrific. Dave Arstein, our webmaster, I had him put all the YouTube videos are now linked on our website. So you just go to the Camera Club website, click meeting videos, and it will take you directly to the YouTube account, and you can see by date all of our meetings, which include our presentations, such as tonight. So you want to come back and hear what Karin had to say, didn't catch that tip or trick, you can easily access that from our club website. So thank you to Dave Arstein for making that happen. Another update and huge thank you to Janice Rosner. She took the volunteer educator list, which is also one of the links on the webpage. And this was started by Kathy several years ago. And it's a list of folks who have volunteered who will help you with whatever they feel is their area of expertise. Could be matting and framing, it could be Lightroom, it could be Photoshop, it could be different camera techniques. And they've listed what they're willing to help you. Totally free, just for the good of the overall club. So if you've got a question, I really encourage you to go look at that volunteer educator list and see if there's somebody on the club and reach out to them and ask them a question. And Janice recently went through and updated that list. And so that if you haven't had a chance or you missed her email, be sure to reach out to her because I think she's just about done with that. And the phrase that she asked me to use is speak now or forever hold your shutter. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So please take a look at that, use it. And if you have any edits or would like your name added to that, please contact Janice Rosner pretty quick. So, and thank you to her. Next announcement is Ed and Bernadette Sylvester. I saw them here somewhere. Support the NEO Youth Center and Friendship Center, which has started an after-school photography club, a workshop situation. They did send out an email, but just in case you didn't see that email, they're asking for older used SLR cameras for the students to use in the workshops. So if you've got one that's been sitting in the closet for a long time, you never use it, this would be a wonderful way to donate it. It in the NEO Youth Center is a 501c3, so the donation would be tax deductible. And I will ask Ed and Bernadette, do you guys want to add anything to that? I don't see them now.
Thank you for offering the opportunity to help the kids at NEO would be a terrific one. I know we've got cameras that are sitting in the closet, and it really will help them. Somebody also offered a tripod, so that was cool. Oh. So just send Ed, he's over there. just send Ed an email and we'll come by and pick it up.
And I want to thank Ingrid she's already donated 2 cameras, so she'll be on.
Very
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
So are the cameras, now you said SLR, now does that mean you can donate film cameras?
I don't know.
Or is it,
I think they're working mostly on digital. I think that's why they asked
okay,
for an SLR. And a camera that doesn't have the different lenses might not be as preferable because of the fact that they're trying to teach the kids the uses of the different cameras and equipment.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're more than welcome. And Janice, I didn't ask you, do you have anything you want to add to the volunteer educators? I didn't give you a chance to speak. Okay.
Let me yeah, I have to unmute myself. No, I'd like to wrap this up this week. So I'm setting a deadline by Friday. And if I don't hear from you by Friday, the list is final and the list is final. It will go onto the website.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. So move to the other folks who are on the board of the club to see if they have any announcements. And I did not see, but our treasurer, Mike Shea, are you here? I'm looking for the yellow square.
Yeah, I'm here.
You are here. Was there anything you'd like to share?
No, not really. Just if somebody is on this Zoom call that has not renewed their membership, keep in mind that this will be the last meeting you'll get to attend. So, that's all I got to say.
Okay, so just remind us, Mike, when is the deadline for having our dues paid? What?
The next Zoom meeting.
The March Camera Club meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. How about membership? Mark Triolo.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Dave. Okay. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I just want to acknowledge our guest tonight and a few new members that we've taken on since the last meeting. Let's see, I think Kendra Evans, is with us tonight as a guest. Is that right, Kendra? Can you?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. If you have any questions about the club, you can go to the website and just send an email to the address on there, and I'd be happy to help you out.
Wonderful.
Or you can text message me through Zoom during the meeting tonight if you have any issues or questions or want to connect with me. So welcome to the meeting this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Do we have any other guests tonight? Could you just raise your hand if you're a guest?
Mark, we do have a guest, Alan Kessler, who is
I
a
see
guest
Alan.
of Karen's.
I'm sorry, is what?
Is a guest of Karen's,
Oh,
our speaker.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. Hi, Alan. Welcome to the meeting this evening. Very nice to have you. And again, if you have any questions as well, you can just do a chat with me. I'm Mark Triolo in the chat and be happy to handle any questions you have. Let's see, do we have any other guests this evening? Didn't see anybody else in there. Okay, good. We've got a couple new members that I wanted to acknowledge if they are with us tonight. Is Deborah Davis with us tonight? Deborah?
No.
I don't see her. How about Michael Quinn? Is Michael in the group? Okay, Paul Schmidt. Paul, are you there? Okay. And let's see, I think we just have one or two more. Sherry Tucker. Sherry around? And Kirk Keeler. Kirk, are you with us tonight? Okay, and then lastly, we do have an older member who's rejoined, Perry Parkhurst, if you remember Perry. Perry, are you with us tonight? I don't see him either. Okay, great. Okay, I'll catch up with those folks at a future meeting, but I'll just reiterate what Mike said in terms of getting your membership in. So this will be the last grace period month They were technically due at the 1st of January, and the grace period ends in about 3 weeks. So if you could make sure you get those in, otherwise we will have to unfortunately discontinue your access to the website and the Zoom meetings. So please do get those in. And if you have any questions or issues or problems with that, you can contact either Mike or me. Be happy to help. Thanks, Rachel, and I'll send it back to you.
And for a second, I've got a pop-up from Anna who says we do have a new member, Dan Chaplin.
I'm here.
You are here. So I didn't know if you knew about him, Mark, but welcome, Dan.
Okay, hi, Dan.
In about a
I
week and a
don't
half
have you
ago.
on my list. Huh.
I sent in the application and the check about a week and a half ago.
Oh, okay, it just hasn't gotten to me yet.
Yeah.
So, welcome.
Welcome.
Very nice to have you.
Okay.
And you probably don't have access to the website yet because I haven't received the application. So you will shortly, and you'll be able to submit images, as you'll see in the second half of the program tonight. So again, Dan, if you have any issues or questions, you can send me a chat during the meeting, and I'll get you my credentials, and we can contact live if we need to. So welcome to the club. I think you'll enjoy it.
All right. Welcome.
Great.
All right. Thanks, Mark. All right. Next up, field trips. Our field trip coordinator is Bill Wages.
Hey, everybody. Well, I actually have something to say about field trips this time. So, it looks like maybe the first official one is going to be the first week in April. We're looking at doing Table Mountain for the wildflowers. I don't have a date quite yet. I'm going to go through my old photos and try to figure out do an average of which of the best dates were. And, but Mother Nature has a lot to say about that as well. So it'll most likely be during the week because on the weekends it gets so crowded out there. We want to try to keep this as safe as possible for everybody. So I'll be getting together with Rick and we'll get a date on the website as soon as we can. Also, David Wong's working on possibly doing something with the wild horses near the Minden, Nevada area. And but he's still waiting to get some information back and doing a lot of research on that as well. And also we've been talking about doing meetups, which are kind of an unofficial type of a field trip thing. If a club member wants to go somewhere and would like other club members to join them, that we're gonna, I guess on the next board meeting, we're gonna figure out how we can get that out to the club members. Is that right, Rachel?
Yep.
Okay. And then, did you want me to kind of go over the list, Rachel, of possible
Yeah, do
meetups?
please share with us what you can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just kind of coming up, thinking about what I had. I mean, right now, all the almond trees are starting to blossom around Marysville and Yuba City area and the Sutter Buttes. That's always a nice drive to take, and it's about 40 minutes from here. So that's starting right now from what I've seen on Facebook. They're starting to bloom. So the Yuba River is always a good time. It's always a good time to go out there. That's a nice thing. And next month, the wildflowers out at the Buttermilk Bend will be starting, and with a lot of poppies and lupins and stuff out there. So that's fairly close for a nice get together. Let's see what I got. Spencerville is always a nice area to go out to, the wildlife area out there. We got Fairy Falls and all that. And the wildflowers will be out there probably by the end of next month as well. So starting end of probably in April, the dogwoods will start blooming up by Highway 49, up past Sierra City and all that. So plenty of areas up there as well. And I can go through some of my old photos and try to figure out where good locations for that is there. Sierra Discovery Trail is always a good place to go. They have these kind of wild lily or something out there certain times of year in the spring that are pretty spectacular as well. And that's off of Bowman Lake Road off of Highway 20. A real easy hike and out there. It might be a little snowy right now, but anyways, that's just a few things, and I'll try to come up with some more stuff. But like I said, it's just some club members want to get together and have some people join them, and we'll have a way to try to get that word out for everybody.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if we can, I know just preemptively, but trying to think about as the Milky Way has its arch coming up, if you can kind of give us some ideas to get some, cool foreground stuff like Mobius arch, that kind of stuff with the arch of the Milky Way. So keep us posted on that. And I know Rick will help us out with that as well.
Yeah, Rick and Mike Oitzman would be two
Yeah.
really people for that as well.
Because I'm up for that, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too as well. I still
Okay.
have a lot to learn with that kind of photography myself.
Yeah.
So,
Right. So
but if anybody has any questions or anything, you can always get a hold of me. My number and emails on the list, member list. So
Hey, Bill.
yeah,
So yesterday I actually drove down to the Sutter Buttes and drove around. And the almond trees are in bloom. They're not quite full bloom, but they're maybe another week.
yeah, that's what I've been seeing. Yeah, yeah, you could see, I've seen rows of them where some of them quite haven't bloomed. One right next to them have a full bloom of rose and stuff. So pretty spectacular. Unfortunately, I won't be able to probably make it, but hopefully some of the other club members will. So yeah, that's pretty spectacular. It's a nice day drive just to go around the base of the buttes, and you have all the almond trees down there. And if you catch it on a nice day with some nice clouds, you got the buttes in the background, and you always have Gray Lodge out that way as well on the other side. So, makes for a nice day out there.
Good. All right.
That-
Anything else, Bill?
That's all I can think of, and I'll start thinking about other field trips as well. But like I said, the first official one I think is going to be Table Mountain, and we can do that safely, and it'd be wide open enough, and
Well, what we're hoping to do is on the website, if you go to field trips, right now, since we don't have a lot of official, or actually no official field trips at the moment because of COVID, but at least provide you with some reference information kind of by month where you might go to shoot to give you some ideas. Because most of these I'm not familiar with. So I could use some hints as to where to go and when to go and where to go. So if you feel like getting out on a beautiful day, you can look at the website and figure out a spot to go.
Yeah, and there's always Tahoe and Donner right now is beautiful up there. This is a great time of year to go up there with some of the snow as well. So.
Okay. That's great, Bill. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
That's great. All right, last announcement that I have, and then I'll throw it open to anyone else, is the gallery shows. So Dave McClellan or Ellen, would you like to share with us any announcements in the exhibition world?
I don't see Dave, so I guess I'll just jump in. So yeah, we got the red show hung, and it really looks wonderful. And thank you everybody that submitted. And then we have the next two shows, the themes for those lined up, and I'll actually send out an email pretty soon with more details. But the theme of one of them is buildings of Nevada, like Grass Valley, Nevada City, so more of a kind of architecture focus. Then the one after that will be creative portraits. So, and each of the shows, they're going to run about 10 weeks. And so those are the two to kind of, let ferment and let bubble, some ideas. So yeah, and I'll get an email in the next week and a half. So, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so any other announcements from anybody? Yes, I see David Wong's hand. Yes.
So I have a couple announcements. My wild rhododendrons and fog workshop up in the northern redwoods of California, the scenes behind me. I still have 2 spaces for that. If anybody wants to join us, we're going to have a nice small group. It'll be a lot of fun with the fog, and there's also a super moon on Wednesday night of the workshop. So we might get, if we're lucky, get some super moon, Klamath River or something like that. So, contact me if you're interested. And it's aimed at newer photographers, but several of the people there are also more experienced. So it's going to be kind of a new intermediate level, and we'll have a lot of fun, with all of that. And then for those of you that are members of Viewpoint Photographic Art Center in Sacramento, we still have a few more days left that if you're a member, you can submit a photo to be exhibited at the Crocker Museum in May through July. And that will be in an exhibit room just for Viewpoint members. So that closes on the 28th. So you have a couple of days left to get your entries in for that if you're interested. And you just go to Viewpoint's website and you'll look under entries. You'll see entry for Crocker Museum.
Okay, thank you, David. Anybody else? Any other announcements? Okay. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President, Kathy Triolo, and she will introduce our speaker. So it's all yours, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And I love your new background there with everything lined up nicely, the agenda.
I copied, I will not take credit, from PPSV. Kathy and I attended a workshop and they had this behind them. And I thought that's a good idea on virtually, so you can tell what's going on or what the order of events are. So it wasn't my idea, but I copied.
Doesn't matter. It's great to steal ideas. I do it all the time. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Karin is joining us, as Rachel said, from Boston, actually Watertown. And we really appreciate the fact that she's a late night person and is staying up to give us her presentation. She may or may not stay for the critique. She's going to try, but I gave her permission to go to sleep if she got really tired, because we do have Chris and Douglas as critiquers tonight. So thank you for that. Karin has photographed nudes in the landscape since 1975. Finding resonances between body and nature, first in traditional photography and more recently in digital photography. In her presentation tonight, she draws from a variety of her series to convey the evolution and range of her motivations and explorations. Emerging out of an earlier interest in portraiture and street photography, Karin's nudes speak to the breadth of human nature and the fragility of our existence on this planet, our profound connection to the natural world. Using an alchemy of light, water, and the human figure, she creates with one click of the shutter abstractions and illusions that challenge us to think and see beyond the predictable. Her abstract photographs of nudes in nature have been exhibited internationally and collected widely, and they reside in 16 museum collections. They've won numerous international awards and have been, as I said, shown widely. So she is asking that you hold questions until the end. And with that, may I please present Karin Rosenthal.
Thank you, Kathy. What a treat it is to be here. I'm going to see if I can get a different view there. That's a little better. I really wish I were with you physically instead of virtually, but it's a very strange year we've been having, and I was so glad I got to be in Nevada City last year in January. It was the last adventure in my life before the big shutdown, and I remember it fondly. I enjoyed your stores. I'm even wearing a pair of earrings I bought in a great little shop in Nevada City, and your field trips sound really exciting. I wish I could join you for some of those. But it was kind of curious that I ended up in the Wild and Scenic Festival to begin with, given that I was doing nudes and most of what I saw was landscapes. But I'm at Brandeis. I guess, I don't know if that was in my, my bio, but I'm at Women's Studies Research Center at Brandeis, and one of my colleagues has relatives who live out where you are, and they were at our center at Brandeis when I had an exhibit up, and the woman especially said, wow, these belong in the Wild and Scenic Festival. You've got to submit. So, so that's how I got to you in the first place. And it's great that it's carrying over into another year with this talk and this connection. So thank you for inviting me. I guess we're ready to share the screen. Is that, I can just go there? Okay. Go here. Okay. So, let's see. Are you all seeing my screen now?
Yes, we are.
Good. Okay. Well, this will repeat a little bit of what you were told, but I've been photographing nudes in nature for most of my professional career, first in traditional photography and more recently, since 2004, not so recently actually, I've been working in digital photography. And some people look at these two images and think they're the work of two different photographers. I know otherwise, of course, and in this talk, I thought I'd take you on my journey and show you how I evolved from one into the other and then even beyond. My interest in photography began a very long time ago. Let me see. There we go. When I was 6, I asked my parents for a camera for my birthday, and I took it to school, took a picture of my best friend, the first grade teacher, and the elementary school principal. But that wasn't even the beginning, because from the age of about 3, I was keeping my mother and my grandmother company in the darkroom that was in the basement of our house. And I'm actually the 3rd generation of women photographers in my family. This is not a typical family. So here we are in a national park. My grandmother took this picture. She was self-taught in Germany, and she had a dark room in her house in Dresden, and she taught my mother, who also studied painting in Germany before she came to the States. My parents and grandparents were German Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany, and my grandfather died when I was quite little. But everybody did photography. My mother did a lot of children's photography, but mostly she was doing painting when I was growing up. And she exhibited a lot. She had a lot of artist friends. There was artwork in the house. And every time we traveled, we went to museums. So I was pretty saturated with art as a kid. And my dad was an ophthalmologist who was very interested in optical gadgetry and did some distinctive medical photography. Here he is talking to my older brother, Steve, who went on to become a well-known architectural photographer. And I'm sitting on the car with my hand-me-down Duoflex until I was 21. All the cameras I had were hand-me-downs from other people in the family. I was influenced strongly by my mother and my father. And so when I went to Wellesley College, I majored in biology and I minored in history of art. And you will see both fields of study come to bear in my work. I decided to go to the museum school, which is in Boston, after I finished Wellesley. So this is the kind of work I was doing around that time. I was doing portraits of developmentally disabled men at an institution that was close by here, and tutoring them. And they had such expressive, open, unmasked faces that I did a series of portraits of them. And during my first year at the museum school, I took this picture. I was really interested in street photography, in urban spaces, in crowds in urban spaces, and how they were made up of distinct individuals. So here with the brick shadows, you see the people separated one from another in their own little realm. During that first year at the museum school, our teacher asked us to bring our cameras for a shoot the next day. And he didn't tell us why. So we showed up and were surprised to see a backdrop, even more surprised to see 2 perfect specimens of our species both young, one male, one female, nude, in front of the backdrop. We hadn't been prepared for this at all. And we do what a lot of people do in digital photography when they don't know what to do. They shoot up a storm. We passed a lot of film through our cameras and just shot and shot out of our nervousness and being kind of unfocused. And I can't remember one good image coming out of that shoot, not anybody else's and certainly not mine. And afterwards, I reflected on the experience and said, oh my goodness, that was so intense and voyeuristic. I will never, ever shoot nudes. So watch what you say, because it'll come back to bite you. Actually, it's things that you have strong feelings about, whether they be positive feelings or negative feelings, things that you feel intensely about, are the things that will become fodder for your work. But the question still remains, how did I go from clothed people in the city to unclothed people in water? It started as around the time I was going to art school. I was renting summer houses with friends in the country and starting to swim in ponds and lakes and growing very fond of swimming and observing the water, especially still water. I was taking pictures of vegetation reflecting into the ponds. And one early spring, when a big lake actually was thawing, I had an opportunity to take pictures of this enormous lake, absolutely still from end to end. And I got my camera and placed the dock in such a way that it covered the horizon, and with its reflection created this Zen structure floating in space. I loved the image. I loved the powerful illusion it created, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was so different from everything else that I had shot. But I was starting to get more and more interested in water. And I was thinking about somehow combining it with my interest in human nature, but not by putting people in lakes, rather shooting pictures in a bathtub. This is a snapshot I did of myself in the bathtub in my apartment in Cambridge. I was fascinated with the way the plane of the water cut through the volume of the body and took on the character of what was reflected in it. I thought that was really interesting. So one very rainy weekend up at a summer house that we were renting, when everybody was very bored, I had no problem finding somebody to model. And I tried taking some of these pictures, and they just weren't working out the way I wanted. For one thing, the bathtub was against the walls in the bathroom, and I couldn't get around the figure the way I wanted to. So I came downstairs kind of frustrated, and a woman had just come inside who had been down the path from our house to a little lake that was right nearby. It was only a few hundred feet down the path. And she said, you know, it stopped raining and the water's absolutely still, and you could walk around the figure in the lake. And I said, oh, I don't know. I'm really thinking about the bathtub. I can be extremely stubborn. So she said, well, if you want me to model, I'd be happy to model. And I changed my mind, followed her down that path. And to this day, I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't done it, because what happened was really a life-changing experience. She lay on her back in the water, and she was, you know, broken into these three beautiful shapes embedded in the sky. It was absolutely mesmerizing. I got up on the dock to get a higher vantage point to the same pose, and I wanted to get still higher, so I put my Rolleiflex up over my head, and she was inverted in the viewfinder even as she was, so she was flying in the viewfinder even as she was floating in the lake. And it took me 2 years to figure out what to do with that image, because I didn't like it just one way and the other way was too tricky. And I kind of like both aspects of it. But I went through lots of Busby Berkeley versions and, you know, tried different things, and finally ended up in this simple parallelogram with her printed twice on one piece of paper, kind of Jerry Uelsmann style. And I guess the 2 years was worth it, because this image really set in motion everything that was to follow, even to this day. A lot of the ideas that are in this image were terribly important to me and still are. So one was a sense of paradox that that just because of the orientation of the image, if she was floating, she looked death-like. If she was flying, she looked totally empowered and lifelike. That, you know, that orientation would change the meaning. And there were powerful illusions being set up by the water that also were amazing. And the water seemed to have an equivalent density to the flesh, and that thickness of water meant a lot to me. It spoke to water as the cauldron of creation. We know that there never is life without a water source. And then it spoke to life and death and the cycle of life. So you'll see these themes come up periodically as I go along. As I say, this is a really important image. This was another foundation image that happened. A lot of people were kind of flirting with astrology in the 70s, and whatever you may think of its validity, it does raise some interesting analogies between human personality and the elements in nature. So it was the first time I thought about the water, what was under the water, representing the unconscious, that which is lurking, which is scary and unknown. And I really like the idea of combining the above water conscious reality with the below water unconscious reality that happened in this print solarization. And the boundary effect, that white line that goes around the form, unites the two. And to my mind, that's an accurate portrait of a person with both aspects represented. I played around a lot with different kinds of light and decided that low angle backlighting was really good for my work. I liked the way, especially in black and white, the way that the shadow merged with the reflection and created a kind of abstract form that was part nude and part something else. And I like that. It made you think and look differently at the figure. And I was really making images that were not so much about the specifics of the body. They were about ideas of things about human nature, about our existence on the planet, about surrealism, about psychology. That's what I wanted to be speaking to. So I was playing around with a lot of different ideas around then. And I was trying to figure out how I could get more time to concentrate on the work. So I applied to Wellesley for an alumni traveling fellowship, which allowed me to go to Greece for 1 year. And I did portraits in the winter and nudes in the summertime. And I was lucky to get the grant. Here I am in the south side of Crete, and it's kind of getting later in the fall and the weather's starting to get stormier. It's not a way most people know the light to be in Greece. There's a lot of spotlighting through the clouds, and there's a light play on the surface of the water all the time, a different kind of iridescence going on. And then I was in a very mountainous area, so the mountains started to almost look animate, like animals or waterfowl gliding into the sea. And I could never get enough of looking at all of this as I walked around, talking to people, taking portraits, and getting comfortable with the culture and improving my Greek. But mostly I would go up into the mountains and do portraits of the older way of life. And you'll all be interested in this. I learned that there was a camera club of Crete, and I joined for $3 to join and $1.50 a month dues. And that allowed me to use the darkroom in Heraklion, which was in the center of the island. And I was way off on the southern coast. So I would develop a lot of film in my pension, solar heating chemistry. And when I had a whole bunch of negatives, I would take the bus, well, 2 buses actually, for 6 hours, and spend a few days in Heraklion and make contact sheets and some prints. And I try to bring prints to my subjects whenever possible. Finally, though, it was springtime and time to think about where I was going to work on the water. And I went to several different islands, finally deciding to work on Mytilene. That's the Turkish name for the island of Lesbos. You may have, I'm not sure if you've heard one or the other. I arrived at a beautiful time of year when the poppies were out. And I had to go back well, actually, the reason I ended up in Mytilene is because it had two internal bays that were the most like lakes of anything of any of the islands in Greece. And so I wasn't sure where I was going to find still water, whether it would be along the coast or inland in these internal bays. So it just seemed to give me options, and that's why I chose to be there. So I went back to Athens and I got my 100 pounds of gear and got on the boat, and I met a German brother and sister, and she, turns out, owned a house 2 hours from the port in the Shepherd's district of this village. This is her house, and they invited me to come join them while I got settled. And as it turned out, I had some difficulty getting settled. So Ellen said I could stay in the house. I could use her house and live there until she came back from teaching school at the end of the summer. And moreover, she said, if I wanted to put my darkroom there, I could. There was a room down here. There was a boarded up window. It was already light tight, believe it or not. There was hardly anything in the room, just some simple things I could use for a darkroom. But there was one problem, and that was it had no electricity. But with the house, I inherited her Greek friends, and one of them was the only electrician on the island. And so he brought the electricity into the room. I went to Athens, bought a whole lot of very simple equipment, had the cab driver back it up on the cobblestone road with all the shepherd's widows watching, and set myself up. And the irony is that here I am in a essentially third world country in the poorest district of town. And I never, in all the years that I shot with film on location, I was never better set up to get feedback for what I was doing than I did here. The house turned out to be 2.5 miles from the water, and I had to get down there early in the morning. And so the same man who was the electrician had an old rusted Zundap. He a German motorcycle he fixed up for me, and then he gave me lessons. And so I used that to get to the water every morning. I was up against some attitudes about shooting nudes, or well, not just shooting nudes, about nudity in general. And I mean, where can you go where you don't run into attitudes about nudity? It's just that you have to learn each culture's way of dealing with it. And if you want to not be arrested and continue your work, you have to be discreet about it. So I would go to a very distant bay with the model, one that had steep sides to it, and so we could be out of the way. And I shot there for about a month, but maybe only had a couple of images that interested me. And it was perplexing because there had always been magic in any time I worked with the nudes and water. And here I was with this precious time, and I wasn't coming up with something. And the problem with being lost in the woods is you really don't know what question to ask. You don't know what the problem is until you find the answer. And this is where I found the answer. I had the woman who had been modeling for me was going to leave, and there was a Dutch couple who were friends who wanted to model with her. And we went out the day before, and the weather was very windy, and we had to, we couldn't shoot in the bay, so we canceled the shoot. And this was our last chance, their last day. And it was the same weather pattern. So I looked across the water to see if there was another place we could work. And I saw these rocks that were strewn around and shallows. And I thought maybe we could pull it off if we, walked the distance over there. And so I set them up in this ring of heads, and I think the weather was shifting as I was shooting, but I don't remember exactly. I just know that I kept backing up and it remained still. And then I was climbing up a ledge of rocks and looking through my Hasselblad, and it looked very similar to this, but not exactly like this, because the sun, the reflection of the sun was dancing on the surface of the water, and it was going to flare and ruin the picture. But I was liking the picture and I didn't want that to happen. So I wondered if I moved the flare in such a way that it was blocked by the rock, whether it would save the image and allow it to be usable. When I developed it up later in the day, I realized not only had I solved this problem, but I had solved the problem with my work in general. Basically, the question I should have been asking is, how do I trap that ever-present Greek sunlight? Because here I saw the power of being able to trap it behind the rock and create this aura. And it added a tension to the image and gave a power to whatever the aura was placed behind. And that tension was what was missing in my work. So, so after they left and a German woman was going to model for me, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I placed her in the water, got in closer, and placed the reflection of the sun behind her. And little did I realize, because I did this quite unconsciously, but that landscape that I'd been observing in Greece at the beginning of my trip, you know, that light play of the water against the mountains, just popped into the image. And I was making a body landscape and not even realizing it. I think anybody else would have known it ahead of me, but it was just so unconsciously done. And ever since then, the body landscapes have shown up here and there. They're usually non-intentional, but they come into the work. And I love them. I think they're better if you're not trying to make them. I think if you do try to make them, they can be very contrived and stilted, but these, you know, just sort of happen organically. Oops, this doesn't want to proceed. So on a hazy day, I could trap that reflection of the sun with something as small as a hand or a wrist. And I continued to make body landscapes, islands. This I made, I went back to Greece 2 summers after my year there to continue the work. And I made this on the island of Santorini. And I think it bears some of the dark history of that island, which is a story in and of itself. And I continued with this idea of the above water and below water simultaneous realities, one obvious and comfortable, and the other lurking and mysterious and a little dangerous. And because I had such good feedback in that dark room that I had in my house, I could look at my contact sheets and see things that were happening even in work that I didn't like in general. And I noted that I could repeat this white line around the figures if I wanted to. And it was like doing a natural direct solarization rather than the one I had done in my darkroom. So that became a second piece of visual vocabulary. And I came to realize that this having the aura and the white line were terribly critical to my work, that I really liked a way to simplify and organize my images, abstract them a bit, take them out of the literal context. And I realized that when I'm looking through the camera, I really study things and try to glean repeatable principles that I can make use of. And that, I think, is the scientist in me at work. And so these things I've learned stay with me like tools that I use in a toolbox. And I think I use a camera often the way I would look through a microscope in biology class and study something in a petri dish. So I came back after after spending 3 years basically working in Greece. I needed to stay closer to home. I was moving, and I wanted to find other projects to work on. and the Nudes and Water stopped sort of arbitrarily. But I got a grant from Polaroid to work with some of their materials, and I was playing with their positive negative 4x5 film. And I was inspired by a sculpture that my boyfriend had made. He was carving wood, and he could make these very abstract figurative pieces just by being able to cut into the wood any way he wanted to. And I kind of envied that flexibility he had to make abstractions out of different human forms, just kind of put back together in another way. And I wondered how far I could push film to do the same thing. So I set up the 4x5 camera with the Polaroid film, and put a black cloth on my bed, and moved a figure through the cloth and made multiple exposures. And then I took it a step further, and I solarized the film in Man Ray style in the negative. And I was trying to kind of break those layers apart and recombine them. So I called this series Fusion Forms. And also around that time, I started going out to New Mexico and Arizona to the Southwest. And one time I was going to be out there renting a houseboat with a dancer who was modeling and another friend who was coming along. And I decided that it would be good to challenge myself to work in color. Color was something I was always a little wary of with the nude, because it's so literal and my work is not literal. And I didn't know where to begin with it or how to even think about it. So I took a book of slick rock pictures and I flipped through it just to see if anything intrigued me. And what I discovered that interested me was lit up sandstone reflected in water. So I believe in the Geiger counter theory of finding material. If it's ticking for you, there is generally a reason for it, and you may come to understand it later, as I did. So I called somebody I knew out in Page, Arizona, right near the lake, and asked, where I might find, pools like this. And he put me in touch with a photographer who photographed on Lake Powell all the time. And that guy knew it so well, he sent me to this very puddle. This was at Rainbow Bridge, and my equipment was all broken apart in a backpack to be carried, and I had to put the back on, load film, take a meter reading, find the right lens. And while I was doing that, my model, the dancer, was doing what she does. She got out on the riverbank and was doing her stretches. And when I looked through the camera for the very first time, there she was in entirety in this pool of water. It was quite an accident. I just moved her hands slightly. But the pose was just an accident. And that solved the problem of how I was going to work with the figure combined with these pools of water. I did these reflected figures throughout that summer. And so when the contact sheets came back, when I returned home, it was in this orientation. And I looked at the image almost as if I'd never seen it before, because she looked like an angel here. And just as with that initial flying and floating image, its character changed much by being.
Yes.
Hold on, let's figure out who that is.
Okay. Anyway, it had a different meaning because of the orientation, as in the earlier flying and floating image. And I kind of liked it. I didn't like the fact that it looked a little obvious that it was turned around, and I wanted to get rid of that, it's tricky kind of sense. So I decided I would present it this way, but I would continue working on the series over a number of summers and try to have them live in their own space where it wasn't so obvious that things were turned upside down. So here, a couple summers later, I poured up some water in some clay in Abiquiu, near where George O'Keeffe lived. And you can only really get a reflection in the shade, but we'd gotten there a little late and I probably misjudged where to place it, because as I was reaching for my cable release, these were shot on tripods. Much as I don't like tripods, I had to use them for this. And here's my hand reaching for the cable release. And I knew that the scene was going to go away. So I shot 4 images in rapid succession, all of the same scene. And they were shot probably within a minute from beginning to end. So this is the first, and this is the last. And you can see how the image gets erased. And not only the image, but the edge of the pool of water is erased too. So she seems to be almost emerging out of this primordial ooze. So there is another, thing I learned that goes into my toolbox. And I continued with losing that edge of the pool. You see how it erases here, but something else happens when you have a shallow bit of water on a rock, and the reflection fuses with the rock, and she looks really like a fossil here. So I created the shade with my own body, joining it to the shadow of the reflection actually of this stick that I dragged down there, and so that she seemed both alive and like she'd been dead for thousands of years. And once again, you have the cycle of life showing up without my thinking about it. It's just a theme that keeps recurring. And I think that she ended up in a space that had its own rationale for being, because that's the way it was shot. And now that looks upside down, and this image looks right. So when I was out in the Southwest, sometimes I just come upon these incredible scenes, like this is in the water pocket fold of Capitol Reef National Monument. And it was a glorious day, and how can you resist shooting something like this? And another favorite place that you may know is Antelope Canyon in Page, Arizona. I bet a number of you have been there. I can't see you all, so I don't know who's nodding their head except Kathy. But it's a place very popular with photographers. You trip over tripods inside there. And I've been back maybe 3 different times, loving to take pictures there and have a series of them. So we were shooting there. We just went there for the fun of being there and taking pictures there. And then the next day we drove, my model and I drove 6 hours back to New Mexico to a bluff where I was shooting more of the puddle pictures. And after we shot some of those, we were just resting out on the sandstone bluff, and nobody was around. So we were taking our time. It was late afternoon. And I looked over at her, and it was as if I was back in the canyon, because she looked just like the overlapping shapes of dark and sandstone that were in Antelope Canyon. So this is Nude as a Slot Canyon. And I came to realize that there's a tremendous similarity between flesh and sandstone, and that lit up sandstone that was reflected in pools of water was really like dissolved flesh in a lot of ways. So I was to go to Cape Cod to shoot more nudes, and did some work in the Provincetown Dunes. I would go out there when the clouds were doing something spectacular like this. And again, I was using the landscape as a reference for the body, and not photographing the dunes as beautiful as they were. They were really inspiring the way I worked with the body. But I had set her quickly because the cloud was expanding, and I was trying to lose the grasses behind her. And I kept digging a hole deeper and deeper and deeper to get low enough until I looked through the camera lens, and here was, the dunes joining with the pubic hair, which was even cooler than I could have thought. It's so important to be really concentrated when you're shooting, to have, almost a meditative quality when you're working with the camera, so that when these accidents are given to you, these little gifts are given to you, you take them and go with them. But mostly I went to the Cape to continue the Nudes in Water because they had stopped arbitrarily and I wanted a way to work with them closer to home. So I heard about kettle ponds on Cape Cod and which were nice and warm, and I thought that would be a great place to work. So I brought my aura and my white line with me to pick up where I left off in Greece, only the light was quite different and it took me a while to adjust to it. It's not as sculptural, it's not as intense. And the aura would tend to happen when a storm was breaking up and the light was starting to come through. It was a different quality of light than in Greece. And the more I opened myself, though, to what was in front of my eyes and what I had to work with, the better the work got. So I had, flora if I didn't have rocks. And I had New England light, which was very changeable. So Mark Twain said, if you don't like the weather in New England, wait a minute. And that's the kind of day this was. The sun would go behind the clouds and I'd take a meter reading and set the exposure on my Hasselblad, and then the sun would come out and I'd have to do it all over again. And it went back and forth like this. And I'd even have to change the concept of how I was thinking about the image when that was happening. So it was maddening until finally everything came together in this one photograph. And I like to think of it as winning the tug of war with New England light. If the light wasn't doing anything very interesting, I could put the body under the water like this. And I shot this picture the same day and hadn't expected much of the light. So I hadn't set her up like this. I actually set her up with her legs straight out behind her. And I had to go to my camera bag to get something, came back, and she had relaxed into this pose. And I saw what the light was doing, and it was incredible. She had no idea what was going on when I asked her to hold that. But I loved it. And one reason I think it works so well is that it has this idiosyncrasy of her pose, which is perfectly natural to her and has personality. If I'd asked her to do that, it would have looked more rigid and artificial, and it might not have come across so well. One thing, if you are working with models, I don't know how many of you do, but when you pose them, there's an extra little direction that's important to give, where you tell somebody to put a pose into their body, to make it their own. I didn't have to in this case. She did it all by herself. And I love the image because, again, it speaks to paradox that one body can have both white skin and black skin. And that very much speaks to the time we're living in, where everybody's so conscious of race. And it also makes the point that, it's a fluke, really, what kind of body we're born into, and what history we're given. Do we have white flesh, black flesh, and then that's the life that we're asked to live. So I also came to discover black water, which is a relative valuation of light. Not that there's an inky substance in the water. In this case, there was a steep-sided bank that was in shade, and the sunlight was well in front of that in the pond. And if I placed the model in the light and exposed for that, all the detail would drop out in the background and reflect itself. And you get this kind of surreal looking image that that is hard to understand. It's really mysterious because it looks like it could be made in a studio, except that you have the character of water without its context. So it's mysterious. And I did a lot of images with black water. Sometimes I'd have two people who wanted to model together. These friends wanted to model together. And here's a case where I shot 3 rolls of film. That's 36 images if you're shooting Hasselblad film. And I went through, all 36 poses. Only one of them was a landscape like this. And I wasn't thinking landscape, it just sort of happened. Any chance that I could work with 2 people was great. And so when I had a couple, I photographed couples, and I liked this sort of edgy hand that came into the image as well. Another couple. And then there were two men who wanted to model together, and they became a landscape. And some more images of two men. And around the time I was turning 50, I was getting tired of hearing comments about my work that I was, what's the word I want? Not immoralizing, but making beautiful renditions of beautiful young women. And that's never the way I thought about my work. You've heard me talk about where I came from and how I think about it. But the thing about dealing with nude photography is that it's a very loaded genre to be working in, and people bring a lot of cultural projection to it, and they think that's what you're supposed to be doing, but that was never my intention. And so actually, when I had a couple that straddled my age who wanted to model for me, I decided to go with it just to be clear about what I was actually doing. And but I struggled during the first shoot because his body was bulkier, hairier, different, and I just was trying to figure out how to pose them, and was really getting to the point where it almost stopped. And then I tried this pose where I put her under the water and him to the side, and she's seen through his reflection here. The shade doesn't cast any light on the water, so you see into what's under the water. And when I looked through the camera, I said, my goodness, that's Jung's concept of animus and anima. The idea that a man has a female unconscious, and to be a whole person, he incorporates this aspect of himself, and vice versa for a woman. It was an idea I always really enjoyed. And so this is man and anima, and this is woman and animus. And here his hairy body actually helps this image happen. And again, because of the shadow on her body, you see through and see him underneath. These days, I think a lot of people would think these are digitally constructed, but it's always been my goal to push seeing as far as I could go, and to use those repeatable principles of, understanding, using my toolbox to make things happen. So these, I'm proud to say, are straight shots. I went on to work with that couple for more than 10 years, and they actually became the cover of the book that I did. It was a catalog for a show I had at the Danforth Museum called 20 Years of Photographs. That was 20 years ago. And I never had a problem working with them again. And I think it's interesting to note that when you're dealing with material and you're struggling and frustrated and want to do something and you're not getting there, one's instinct might be to say, I'm going to stop. I'm going to, I'm obviously not doing the right thing. I'm going to leave that. But I think artists tend to stick with ideas that they want to see happen and push through them. And it's just on the other side of that wall that you can break through that the good material lies. It's all yours, and there's a huge amount of turf out there for you to explore. So as I was getting older, I was interested in aging, in looking for mothers and daughters and fathers and sons who might model, and looking for two generations. And I came up with an artist friend of mine, a painter friend, and his son, who I discovered was a water rat. So once I learned that was that made it clear he'd be my model. And they were able to come to the Cape one day that was spectacular when I shot this picture. And I love the image because it layers like 3 different things on top of each other. So you sense their comfort level with each other, how close they are. How the difference in their age from their skin, but you also have this confusion between where does the body end and where does land begin? Is this a stalactite? What is this? Is this flesh? Is this a rock? It gets confused, and I love that compression of 3 different things into one image. By 2003, the images were getting less substantial, more merged with nature, more fragile. And this was a couple years, not even a couple years after 9/11. And there'd been some significant loss in my life and in, in our countries as well. And my work changed with it as, as did people's sensibility in general, I think. I shot this image, which was even more broken down, even more merged with nature. And then I went beyond this. I was viewing into my Hasselblad, looking through the viewfinder in color, but recording on black and white film. And I was getting so abstract that when I developed the film, I realized that maybe it was happening in color, but there wasn't anything going on in black and white. And I developed roll after roll that just weren't working. One of the models actually, who had gotten a digital camera and was having a good time with it, suggested that it would make sense to get a digital camera and use it to preview with, because here was a case where I was on location and I didn't have a good way to get feedback. But if I could take a picture and then put it in a computer, convert to black and white, I could see if my idea was really happening. And that made a lot of sense. So in 2004, I bought my first digital camera. And I was playing around with it, having some fun. I was up on the North Shore of Boston when there was this wonderful, glorious light. And I went to Halibut Point, a place with tide pools that I loved. And I took this photograph. And I realized that I was craving color. I was craving more stuff. And I had told myself when I got to the point with the nudes and water that doors weren't opening for me anymore, I would move on. And so I decided to go to a new place, to Vinyl Haven Island, which was off the coast of Maine. And I found a wonderful tidal basin full of all sorts of tide pools. In here, the figure is reflected as in the earlier series that I showed you of those puddle pictures that I had made out in the Southwest. The figure is standing over the tide pool. Obviously it's shot upside down to this, but I wanted you to see her pose. So here's her leg. I don't know if you can read it, but here's her leg and she's bent forward from her waist. Here's her arm going up to her head. And you get a melding together of the pose and what's in the water. And then on my computer, I turned it sideways and I really enjoyed it from this direction. I liked the way it made this boomerang shape and hot dog shape and reminded me of the work of Jean Arp, the painter. So I called it Arp. And this is a digital photograph. I was trying to use the digital camera to preview with, but it turned out I was shooting apples and oranges, that the Hasselblad had one way of seeing and the digital camera had actually more options. And I was enjoying being able to get feedback on a new series, not just in the camera on location, but then when I went back to the house and downloaded into my computer. So I shot one more roll with my Hasselblad and, and continued on with digital, and I've been digital ever since. So this image is the one you saw at the beginning, and I think you'll realize very quickly how it's made, because here she is lying across this rock and in this pose. And it's overcast, the sky is projecting around her and making a perfect cutout of her shape. And again, as in the Animus Anima pictures, there's no light coming off of her body. The sun is all coming, the light is all above her in the sky. So you get a transparency to what's in the tide pool. And then when you turn it around, she's made up of that material. And you can see it's all about light and shade because there's the continuity of the stuff in the tide pool. So in Vinyl Haven, there were just wonderful things to work with, beautiful shells that I could use, and great vegetation and some really interesting rock. So I shot lots of these heads, And I particularly enjoyed doing them. There was sort of an extra giggle when I would make them, and I didn't know where that was coming from for a while. And then I realized it was because I had loved the work of Ruth Thorne Thompson. I don't know how many of you know her work, but it's pretty special. This is one of her pieces. She would take like a picture of a photograph of a nautilus shell and cut it out into this profile of a figure from antiquity, Hera or Nefertiti or somebody like that, and then stick it into the sand and rephotograph it with a pinhole camera. They're very small prints, but I was charmed by them. And what you love lives inside of you. So given the opportunity, I was making my own versions of her work. So this is a picture my mother took of me when I was a kid. And forget about the boat. That was a prop she handed to me. But a friend of mine told me a great story. He was a painter and he was struggling with his work because, you know, he had run out of material and he didn't know how to think about what to do. And so he asked a teacher who happened to be a very good friend of mine as well. And Don told him, think about what you did when you were a child and nobody was telling you what to do. And there was nothing that I enjoyed more as a kid than scrambling over the rocks at this place we would go every summer and looking for tide pools and looking inside the tide pools for what was going on inside of them. And not much changed because here I am in Vinyl Haven and fortunately had two models. So one got this picture. You know, it's a beautiful day, beautiful place, beautiful model. And what am I doing? I'm pointing the camera down here into this pool of water, catching her reflection. So here's the image I was shooting right here. So when we were in Vinyl Haven, we would sometimes pick up rocks because carrying equipment, you know, just isn't enough. You've got to carry a few rocks too. And would bring them to tide pools and place them under the water and sometimes set them up in these still lives and then reflect the figure into the still life. Here it was just a rock that I added to the tide pool. And occasionally I take some really nice rocks with me from Vinyl Haven and then I could use them anywhere. So I, you know, shot this somewhere else in Maine. And it was one of those cases where we were waiting days for the sun to come out and it just wasn't happening until finally it was starting to break through. And it was so noteworthy, you know, and I said, why don't you hold the sun like a discus thrower? And she was of course standing above the pool, had no idea how things were coming together. So I was directing her to the left, to the right, to, you know, raise her arm or lower her arm, whatever. So it ended up in this funky pose. And then, you know, she's reflected into the rock, which some people say looks like a Klimt painting. And the overall effect is to have her look something like a diva in this image. If the sun was on the flesh, it's a completely different story. The other images you saw were shot with overcast or no light on the figure, maybe only some backlighting. But here the flesh is lit up and it reflects into the water and looks like flesh. You really know there's a body there. And here you have a case where you have the partially lit body reflected. So there's both sunlight and shade on the body. And when it reflects, the sunlit area does look like flesh, but this doesn't look like flesh in the shade. It makes a transparency and it makes a body be part flesh, part rock. And then if you have a disturbance in the reflection and the edge changes like that, it takes on a character of something else. It reminded me of this undulating lichen that was on the rocks in Vinyl Haven. And I loved that idea that you tweak the human script and it becomes some other piece of nature. And there's a continuity between all of creation. So when I had light on the flesh, and she acted almost like a flesh reflector card, and I photographed these flesh paintings very close up. This is a macro shot. This one I love because it's like the story of creation. We know that methane gas turned into protoplasm somehow in tide pools, and this has a gaseous feeling to it because it's out of focus and the water's moving. So I call this Genesis. I do a show of new work in my house every year. It's a way to have a deadline to pull the work together. I do it around the holidays, so it's also a big holiday show. And I get to live with it for a while and think about what I'm going to do the next year. I also send out a postcard, and for this particular year, I decided to send this one, which was much more abstract and less obviously figurative than things I had sent before. So I called it Reflected Nude at the Basin. And the phone started to ring. Where's the nude? And people came to the show looking for the nude. And believe it or not, they found the nude. I didn't. Here's the knee, the thigh, the hip, the crotch, the shoulder, highly foreshortened, but she's there in entirety. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. So, so I wondered if I could find more figures like that intact the next year. So I borrowed a different camera, bought a different lens, and went in search of them. And of course, I needed sunlight to make these pictures. And what I got were days and days of overcast. And when the sun came out, I shot like crazy. So I came up with images that looked, were really neat, like, the way the flesh wraps around the seaweed was really nice. But where were the figures? I had trouble finding them. And then one night I had a proof of this. It was about 8.5 by 11 proof. And I saw some repetition going on. I turned it upside down and looked more closely and realized, my goodness, there's her head, there's her head, there's her head, there's her head, there's her head. And it repeats numerous times, and her whole body is in there. There's her breast and her rib cage. It just makes this funny bean shape pull around the seaweed. So when I went back and counted all of them, she's in there 30 times, actually, kind of tucked in and somewhat hidden. This was another one that was shot that summer. The figure was a little more obvious, but still a little hard to find. She's here and she's here and she's here. And what I didn't understand is how she could be flipped in all these different directions. Why would that happen? So when a physicist was at my house who was a collector of my work, I asked him, and he actually had an answer. I had never taken physics, but in a textbook, there's a picture of a spoon with a concave and a convex side, and it reflects inversely on each side. So you're looking at a lot of contoured spaces, although it's hard to perceive that that's what you're actually looking at. So you get these figures with, you get generalized flesh and specific figures, then you get something that looks like a mollusk over here. And in this case, with the figure, her arm morphs into a dolphin. Once again, you tweak the human script and it becomes another creature in nature, and we're all interconnected on the planet. The other thing that I find really intriguing about this picture is the paradox of the fact that it's a close-up. I mean, these are shells. I haven't done anything to this pool. There's a broken mussel shell here, another shell here. It's only a couple shells deep. That's not a big space. And yet I can't look at it and see it that way. I can't look at it and see it as a little pool of water. It defies it. It wants to pull out and kind of spread away. And it almost looks like you're looking into the universe. And it has this mystery in it that I think is really interesting. So having had trouble finding enough figures that year, I thought, okay, I'm going to make sure I get them. And I set up some shells and got this picture. And then my model, after I was using mussel shells, she found a beautiful little snail and she said, put me in this. And she kind of pushed it towards me. And I said, no way, I can't put you inside of that. And she said, try. Well, it turns out that snails make absolutely perfect reflections. I don't know what it is about the optics, and my dad wasn't around anymore to ask, but somehow, you get this incredibly clear and perfect reflection in a snail. So when I shot this image, which was made, it's maybe a scene that's maybe 2 to 3 inches high by, I don't know, 7 inches wide, tiny, tiny little seaweed. And I saw that there were multiple simultaneous reflections happening on this because it's just one click. But I wanted to make the figure and the pose a little clearer. So I grabbed a snail and stuck it in there, and lo and behold, there, you can see the pose really well. So the image is kind of a Lilliputian tableau. You can call it a jazz riff or a tumbling act, but it really is a kind of playful, neat image. So later, I came to understand why I was so intrigued with this underwater reality, with the disturbing elements and the desire to think about something that was more surreal. And I came to realize it had a lot to do with my family history and the fact that it turned out we had lost a lot of relatives in Nazi Germany, but nobody ever talked about them. So it wasn't really known. My dad lost 17 immediate relatives of his family and never spoke about them. And I did know that my grandmother's mother and aunt had been killed, but she didn't talk about them either. And I decided that that I needed to learn more about them because it was so tragic that how they were killed, and then they were murdered a second time. Essentially, it's the second death that they're just totally forgotten. And I couldn't live with that notion. This is the only picture I had of my dad's family. I knew this was my grandmother. I knew my dad was back here, but I had no idea who these people were and, whose wedding it was. But I've come to learn, who they are and what their names were, where they're from, what happened to them, what they did. And I've restored a lot of the family history. And I made this piece. Again, this is a straight shot. I went to the Weissensee Cemetery in Berlin, which was an intact Jewish cemetery. And this phrase that means only someone forgotten is dead really resonated with me. And I took a picture of the tombstone. And then I printed that image on some overhead transparency material. So, and took it with me to a shoot where the model wet it and then held it from behind. And that's how I got this image. So it is a straight shot combining the two elements. So that journey into darkness certainly changed some of my work. And, it was a darker period to be looking at life and the cycle of life. And I was making more ghost-like images, again, working with a vocabulary of light that would help me. And I discovered that dappled sunlight really, really worked. So the figure, these are again, straight shots. This piece was in the show out in Nevada City, another ghostly piece, and the merging of nature coming, out of my family history and the sense of loss. But I've also gone back to doing some portraits. This one, I was going to be shooting some nudes, but the model was going through a really dark period in his family and kind of a life and death situation, and it was written all over his face. And so I was really compelled to do a portrait of him, albeit in a completely new way. And I really like that picture. And it's another portrait-like image that's one of my newer pieces. You could call it Narcissa. She's looking at herself. And I think it's not just kind of admiring herself. I see some confrontation in it because her hands are placed in such a way, it's like, see here, what are we, what's going on here? So I call the image dialogue, because I really think it's about the way we all have conversations with ourselves, thinking about, things that have happened and what we feel good about and what we don't. And I think it gets evoked in this picture. And this picture was also in the show last year. And it was one of those lucky moments. We knew a storm was coming in. We knew it was like the Saturday of Labor Day weekend at a very popular spot. But we somehow beat everybody out there and caught the moment when the sky was starting to change and it was still iridescent, but the wind hadn't picked up and the water was absolutely still. It was really the calm before the storm. And I had this wonderful model who could glide beneath the surface without disturbing the surface, and just kept moving and it kept shooting. And I love this iridescent image. And what you're looking at is all reflection except for the water and the body under the water. Even this, this is not an actual tree, it's a reflection of the tree. And I think it speaks to kind of spiritual reckoning with our life on the planet, that making peace with death and aging and honoring our existence for what it is. So that's the end. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Hope I didn't go too long. I have no idea what time it was.
If you could stop sharing, then we could bring everybody on screen. Sure. Thank you. Well, Karin, there have been so many comments and wonderful comments that I would like to just start by reading some of these comments to you, and then also having people ask questions.
Okay.
Reminds me of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. You answered, do you only shoot with film? You answered that one. Now you're shooting
digitally. Yeah.
Gorgeous art, amazing art, extraordinary work, fascinating woman. Wow, these are all extremely creative and shows wide imagination net. That one got cut off. I'm sorry, Jerry. Fascinating work and talk, a great example of exploring a particular subject in so many creative ways. Fantastic presentation and images. So I want you to know how appreciated you have been. So let's open this up to questions from people.
One thing about a Zoom talk is you're just sort of talking into the abyss. You don't really, thank you for smiling, Kathy, because I only had a couple of people up there, and it's sort of like, oh, thank God, you just don't know if people are into it or, falling asleep. So
no, I would venture to say that there were more exciting and positive comments that I didn't even get a chance to read, but I want to give people a chance to ask questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So opening up, I think John Sievert, you had a question, didn't you?
Yes, how were you taking pictures of, you called it the black water?
Yeah, it's just a relative valuing of light. If you have shade in the background and the shade is reflecting, and you have the body in the light, and there's quite a differential of the intensity of light, and you expose for the body that's in the light, then any of the details that might show up from the background drop out. And I have to say, it happens perfectly for maybe 15 minutes, but I want to shoot for an hour and a half, So I've had to do some heavy duty dodging, and not dodging, but burning in on some of the Blackwater images, like Dimpled Landscape, the one where I shot 36 images and only one was a landscape. That one, I have masks for, and I have to do some heavy duty burning on it. Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple of questions actually. One, maybe a dumb question, but the ability to actually see underneath the water. Typically I'm dealing with glare, and maybe it's my positioning. So how are you getting that visibility and transparency into the water? And also the quality of your water is unlike anything I've seen. It almost was very viscous, almost looking. So is
Right.
there a technique to getting a viscous look to the water?
It's all observing and learning. If you look at still water against the light, because I'm working with backlighting, it tends to have a thicker quality. You know, if you're looking into the light with it, it certainly would happen in Greece, especially on certain days. I mean, if there's the other way, you get that slightly, well, you get certainly a grayer sense when there's overcast reflected on the surface, you know, then you will get that grayness. I forget what your first, oh, how do you see through?
Right, positioning, yeah.
Well, as I described, there was something that was in shade. If you noticed, like in the first Animus, the man and Anima picture, you know, where the light, again, it was backlighting. So his body was in shade. There was an edge of light along his edge, and where the light was, it reflects brightly. But where the shade is on his body, he makes an area that you can see through. So if you put something that blocked the sunlight and reflected, say you had a, you know, a black cloth or something that you could set on a frame and put in the water, then whatever you put in there, you could see through with. I never use a polarizing lens. You know, observing water has taught me so much, observing light and water and their interactions.
That's the thing, is I have to learn how to see differently. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. I don't talk much. I mean, people find it kind of amazing that, you know, they model and I'm so quiet because I'm studying. I'm always studying. It's very much looking through a microscope into a petri dish, you know, for me.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Douglas, you're talking, but you're muted. You're still muted.
Pressed the space bar that time and it didn't do anything. Karin, I wanted to add a little more to your answer. If you have a model whose skin is still dry and she's dropping into the water, the meniscus on the water will bend one way. And then if she's wet coming up out of the water, the meniscus will bend the other way.
Yeah, that can happen. But there are times when you don't even need that, and it would create it would happen in Greece sometimes. It's almost like the water was swollen as it was about to evaporate into the sky. But you're right about the meniscus, and you can kind of push against it too. It has a bit of its own tension that it holds, right? And before it breaks.
Any other questions? Knowing that I can't see all of you holding up your hands, and Karin can't either, you can speak up. David.
So, Karin, the light that you work with, is it almost always just available light?
Yes.
You ever play with light sources that you bring to change the reflections at all?
Nope.
No.
I stay with what I see, and I'm kind of stubborn about it. I've had students who've wanted to bring reflectors and, you know, do all sorts of tricks and, you know, fill flashes and things. And I just don't want to do that. I've learned so much from nature. I just want to keep observing and building my vocabulary and working with what I get enough from what I've gleaned just from using what's in front of me.
I mean, some of the images, like the one that with the lily pads and I mean, that looks like a very purposeful positioning of the model.
Well, I was trying to go for that, that pun, but the light was still, you know, driving me nuts. It was kind of, you know, in and out. And I don't know how long it took to land that shot. And I can't remember anymore. I just am so grateful I got it.
So then other times you're positioning the model in the water and you're having the model move, or you're moving, or you're both moving.
Usually I have the model stay put and I move and I explore, you know. And one reason I don't like tripods at all is they lock you into a certain angle and position. And I found, especially with things that involve reflections, you know, just a fraction of an inch can change things dramatically. And, you know, moving to one side or another side. And I want all that mobility. So I do hand hold. And I'll try something. And then if it isn't working, then I'll, you know, reposition the model. And then I'll start searching again. But if the model is moving, you're not going to have still water. You know, it's bad enough that I'm moving. I've got to wait for my own stillness. But if we're both moving, it becomes something else.
And is there a favorite focal length that seems to work better or not, or no?
Well, when I was shooting with a Hasselblad, I tend to like telephoto lenses, and I was shooting with a 150 at first, and then I ended up doing a lot in even tighter with a 120 macro. I like that lens a lot. And then when I went digital, you know, I have zoom lens, so I can move in and out, but I'm doing something completely different with the digital work. Right, the tide pool pictures are digital, and so is the more recent work that I've done.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
I hate to cut this off, but we are running out of time. And so, Karin, I just wanted to thank you so much. One of the wonderful things is you're able to articulate your process and help us understand sort of from the beginning to where you are now. And I'm excited for you to see where else you're going to go from now on.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. To figure that out.
Yeah, so you're welcome to stay around.
Okay.
And
I think I will watch for a while, and thank you so much. I'd love to see the other comments if there's a way to save the chat somehow. Or
or you can also look onto it yourself while we're doing other things.
Oh, okay.
Feel free. And if I can copy it and maybe email it to you also.
Okay, that would be nice. But
great.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I'll be back.
Yes, we are too. So Rachel, over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Karin. That was really inspiring, truly. Yes, clap. We do a little virtual clap for her. That was really.
Thank you, Karin. That was great.
We always strive here for education and inspiration, and I think you hit both of those tonight. So thank you very much.
Good.
So you're very articulate as well. I've not heard someone speak about their work in the way that you do. So I found that also very compelling. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we too are going to take a break, take a 5-minute break, folks, at 7:43. So 7:48. So grab a glass of wine or a snack or whatever, take a bathroom break, and we will be back 7:48. All right.
Thank you, Rachel.
All righty.
Can Karin give us an email address? I have something to say to her personally.
Do you want to, are you going to send it out to the group, or?
You know what, why don't I send it out to the group for you, Karin?
Okay, it's also on my website. There's a different one. You have one, you know, doesn't matter. I have 5.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if I give her the one that you and I have been talking on?
That's fine, that's fine.
Okay, super.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so Eva, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
It's the initial K Rosenthal 45 at gmail.com. And let me put it on and I'm going to put it on the chat too.
Good. Yeah.
And let me get back to the chat. Okay, here it is. That's true, Dave. I'll never look at the water the same either. I'm going to start peering through it to see what I can see on the other side. I agree. Y'all can unmute if you want for 3 minutes.
No, I was just interested because my mother was a photographer in Germany, and my father met her at the photo shop in Mannheim. And when she came to the US, she brought her Leica camera with her and helped.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And we have a picture of a book that was about my grandfather and other doctors. And the cover on the book is the picture she took of him examining the child.
Oh, wonderful.
It really hit home when she was talking about Germany and what our families went through.
Yeah, well, I have pictures of my family from Poland in the 1800s. So, you know, photography's been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent program.
Definitely.
And really meeting the goal of the camera club, the teaching and exposure to how to do things.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us are going to go out and start looking at water and putting things in and getting reflections just to see what happens? I am. And Bill, did you see all those sun stars on those bodies?
Yeah, you know, I saw those. Yeah, I saw all those little, oh, look, there's one there.
I immediately thought of you.
No, it's a whole different take on photography. And I remember seeing her work up at Gallery 125. Maybe did I bring you up there? I brought somebody up there to look at her photography. I don't know if you were working, and I saw her check this stuff out. And I took somebody up there to see it. It was just amazing. So
Maybe, I think it was me.
yeah,
It was a year ago.
yeah. But yeah, it was, yeah, I remember meeting her at the sign up place, and then she had her work up at the Will's place up there at Gallery 125,
Right.
Broad Street. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
You know, you can appreciate it even more seeing the body of her work that she presented tonight.
Yeah.
Because it's really cool to look at the progression and understand where she came from.
Yeah. And where her whole path, and, you know, and how it, you know, no, it was a great presentation, one of the best ones in a long time. So
yeah, well, I think it's really cool to get permission from a very creative person to pursue whatever is inside of you, whether you know what it is or not, but just to keep pursuing and persisting to unlock that creatively.
yeah. Hey, Ellen, did you get any good shots when you went up there and saw the blossoms, or?
You know, I got one. It's probably okay. I also didn't know if any of the, you know, if the farmers would get upset if I just, you know, because I didn't, because I read that like Instagram and like has really kind of fueled this kind of like drive for people to like go out and take photos in the blossoms and the almond, and then they'll find people that have just invaded their space, and then it upsets them. So I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, I understand it. That and the sunflowers are a big controversy, you know, because when the sunflowers out, they go out into their fields and trample their plants down and all that. So
yeah, I did see one. There was one shot where there was kind of, it was like a driveway, and then there was like a little canal right next to it, and then there were almond orchards on either side, and then there was like one of the buttes kind of poked up right around where like the road led. So I stopped along the roadside and got a photo of that. I mean, I think it's an okay picture. I haven't really done anything with it yet, but yeah, no, it was really neat. I'd actually never have gotten that close to the buttes before. I have cousins that used to live in Calusa, so we drive past them all the time growing up, but I'd never gone up to them before. So
yeah, it's really cool if you can catch it right after a real heavy rain, and you get the reflections between the rows as well, because the fields will flood sometimes.
yeah, and that's what I was looking for yesterday, was like any like fields that had like flooded and reflected and just any, but I didn't really see a whole lot of that.
But you're saying you think they're about a week out?
Probably. I mean, I did see some that are just about full bloom, and then but I did see a lot that were just kind of like halfway, 3/4. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to get started for the second half of tonight's program. And I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to share my screen and share with everybody the best of each of our photo categories for the images that were submitted by last Friday at midnight. So bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen. All right, can folks see the picture?
Yep.
Great tree, okay. All right, so this one is best assigned subject, which was Baby It's Cold Outside. This is Cottonwood with Hoarfrost by Janice Rosner. You guys can clap or woohoo, whatever you'd like to do. Okay, best abstract is Icy Fireworks, captured on New Year's Eve. The artist is Tom Quinn.
Woo-hoo.
Woohoo, exactly. Best architecture is Wrapped in Light. Artist is Mike Oitzman. Best architecture, there must have been a tie, is Blue Door by Chris Carpenter. Best fauna is That's My Fish by Janice Rosner.
Giving sound effects too.
Yeah, exactly. Best flora is Moss Sprouts with, I've got to be able to read this, Moss Sprouts with Dew Mimictulily. This is by Tom Quinn. Best natural landscape, it's called Morning Dusting by Michael Quinn.
Woo-hoo.
Yep, woohoo. Best night photography, titled Josh and Orion by Michael Quinn. New member, he did very well this month. Best people, this is Newborn, 4 Days Old by Shelby Cohen.
Oh.
Isn't that sweet? Best photojournalism, this is called Unloading by Mike Shea. Best creative fantasy, this is Sandhill Crane Dance Painted by Kathy Triolo.
Somebody else clap.
Clap, 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 clap for you. Best manipulated but realistic, our new category. This is titled Alaska in the Rain by Ingrid Lockhart. Best black and white, entitled, I say Moebius, but Mobius Arch, Framing the Whitney Range by George Pelpel. Last category, best color, is entitled Grand Prismatic Spring by Rick Eshelman. And that concludes our best of categories. These are now a slideshow on the Camera Club's homepage. So congratulations, everybody. Well done. And now up is the critique session. And I'm going to turn this back over to Kathy and Chris and Douglas.
Okie dokie. All right. So we're going to move right along because we've got a lot of submissions. Hallelujah. And oh my God. So we're going to move through them. We've got Chris Schiller and Douglas as our critiquers. And I'm going to pull up the slideshow if you'll just give me a minute here. All right. And oh, of course I have to share, don't I? That would be the most important part. All right, sharing my screen. And here we are. All right, everybody see that?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So assigned subject, cell phone only. First one is From the Navy Pier. I'm bringing it up.
And now understanding the number of pictures and the time, I'm going to be even a little quicker than I was thinking.
Okay, there you go.
This is a wonderful image. The ice is very striking. It's very visually engaging. I love that. And then you set the context with the skyline in the background. So I really like this picture. I wish, it looks like it's tipping a little to the left. I think I would rotate it clockwise to straighten it up. Nice photo.
That's by Jay Schuff. Okay. Please don't eat the flowers.
While the photographer might have been trying for just a humorous image, this photo actually has some photographic qualities. The composition has the baby's eye and mouth and the main flower on a diagonal, and the color palette of the image is very pleasing. We could really go over the top and say that the pink of the flowers echo the pink in the baby's cheek, but let's not go there, eh? I love the ambiguity of the baby's expression. Does the baby really, really want to eat the flowers, or is it repulsed by them? Thanks for an unexpected image we haven't seen before.
Images by Craig Rorson.
Hey, Chris, could you raise your volume next time a little bit? It's kind of hard to hear.
I have my mic right in front of my face, so all right.
Turn your sound up too. All right, this is free parking in Tucson.
So this is a nice picture. It's got a very formal composition, and I like the way that was handled. The lighting is really even, which plays well for the subject. This is a lot about the painting the muralist did, and I'm glad you included the muralist signature in the upper left. And then what the photographer brought to this is either his or her car, or found the car there being struck by the saucer, which makes it a fun picture with a lot of story to tell. So a nice photo.
That is by Chris Carpenter. This next one is Santa Barbara Wharf Pelican.
Like the baby image, this photo seems simplistic on the surface, but the composition is quite good, and I'm guessing the photographer consciously chose it by repositioning themselves to capture it. The photo might have been processed by a phone app to increase texture and contrast, and it gives the image a graphic quality. I love the redness at the tip of the beak and how the pelican is definitely keeping an eye on the photographer. My one suggestion is that having taken the image this far in terms of processing, take it even farther to make it look even more graphic. Thanks for sharing.
And that was by Gary Kartstaffner. This next one is, hello, there we go. Mount Shasta Summit, before and after storm.
So this is intriguing. Apparently somebody put a cell phone up to a telescope with a dirty lens and from a predictable position and got essentially a before and after picture. That's pretty cool. So nicely done. Critique of the exact image quality doesn't really pertain in this instance. So let's enjoy what we got here. Nice.
And that was by Chris Schiller. This is Snow Day, Let's Play.
This image is a good example of how photography has changed with cell phones. They make it easy to hold the phone up to the fence and explore and compose an image like this. Yes, a photographer with an SLR could envision and capture an image like this, but since a phone is lighter and has a larger and perhaps brighter screen, let alone a screen at all, it makes it much more likely to capture a shot like this. I love how the snowy fence frames and creates little mosaic pieces of the larger scene, and how the peaky snow crystals echo the snowy trees in the background. The diagonals come geometrically for free. Thanks for this unique image.
And the artist is John Sievert. This is Window Display.
This is a very pleasant, pleasing picture, Valentine's Day themed. The pink of the flowers are very engaging. That's what draws me in most of this photo. There's little things to explore. You can see the silhouette of the photographer a little bit, another person sitting behind. It's a picture with a nice feeling.
And that is by Fred Crowder. This is Mural in Columbia.
Reviewing photographs of works of art is challenging because one must separate the original work from the photographer's interpretation of it. In this case, the framing has put major elements of the original work, her lips, sunglasses, and forehead flower on a diagonal, and that's a good thing. The composition might have been improved by including a little more to the left of the frame so that the eye of the hummingbird is not cut off. I might personally also increase the saturation of the image to bring a little more punch to the fluorescent paint used in the original. This is a great capture, thanks.
The artist is Bernadette Sylvester, or the photographer of the artist. Yeah, this is Young Cats Playing.
This is a fun photo. I know cats, I know they're playing, they're not fighting. And the composition is good. Color balance is a little cool. I would warm it up a little. And we didn't really discuss rules of submitting from a cell phone, but I assume you went through the computer to get it in the show here. But it's well done. I like this photo, it's fun.
The photographer is Jeff Alstatter. And the Warriors win.
Wow, what a moment to capture. It grabs us by our Warriors jersey and pulls us into the excitement and celebration of that moment. I can hear the cheers and feel the exuberance. I cropped just a little bit off the right side of this image and I was surprised by how much it changed it. The raised fist and the scoreboard and the lighted ads in the upper left and the area of clarity at center court all snapped onto diagonals and gave 4 anchors for my eyes to cycle around. Even the subtlest changes can have huge effects on the image. Thanks for taking us to this moment.
The photographer is George Pelpel. This is Fort Bragg sunset.
What a spectacular wave capture. I've tried to do these and it takes 20 takes. And then with the man in the middle, it's almost like a butterfly. It's so beautiful. My only suggestion is to crop in tighter. This story is really about the 2 waves and the man and the sun. And I think the beautiful waves off to the right side of the picture are actually a little bit of a distraction in this one. So I would crop in left, right, top, and bottom, everything, and just come into the rectangle that shows what this picture is really about. It's nicely done.
The photographer is Anna Woodhall. This is Wolf Tracks Bison in Yellowstone.
I like to look at these images first without reading the title, and that's what I did with this one too. I love the abstraction and the ambiguity of whether this is an aerial image or something taken with the camera 6 inches off the ground. Then reading the title brought more elements into focus and gave me something more to explore about the photograph. But seeing the hoof and paw prints increases even more the desolation and mystery of the photograph. They are just hints and impressions on an unforgiving landscape. This is a really nice photograph.
The photographer is Chris Carpenter. This is The Meeting.
This is a really intriguing image, very nicely done. It's got a sadness to it and yet a warmth, caring, loving quality. So it's got 2 different emotions going on. And then the title, The Meeting, is intriguing. I'm not quite sure what's meant by that. And it leaves me wanting to explore it even more. So I enjoyed this photo on many levels. It's nicely done.
And the maker is Ellen Davis. Next category is abstract. And our first photo is Might Rain.
This is another example of how digital cameras or cell phone cameras make experimentation possible. One might not have risked a frame of film on this image, but digital cameras make photography almost free. There's a mystery to this photo. We can't tell if it's a business. We can tell it's a business, but we're not sure why we're here or whether we are coming or going or waiting a minute until the rain subsides. I suggest the photographer crop some off the bottom of the image to make the photo even more abstract. Just a hint of the dashboard is all that's needed, and then it wouldn't distract from the main abstract elements of the image. Thanks for sharing this view of the world.
The maker is Fred Crowder. This next one is River Lights.
Oh, now it's showing up bigger. When I viewed it earlier, it was a little too small. That's good. I like this one. I think it's well done. It's got a very painterly quality, and the swell and the water off to the left looks very sensuous. It's just got this gentle rise. I actually don't think I need the vertical white light reflections at the top. I think you might crop off the top and have an even stronger image. It works either way. It's a nice photo. I love the color palette and all the color variety in here. Good.
The maker is Patricia Leviton. This is Tiffany Glass Mud Puddle.
This photograph could also have been titled Crystal Cathedral. This photo exists at the intersection of math and physics and beauty. It shows there's a reason why great architecture and design mirrors natural forms. The photographer chose just the right amount of flat, plain ice at the bottom. The photo doesn't work without it. The only question in my mind is whether a polarizing filter might have deepened the crystal structures, but I personally would have had to try it to see if it were better. This is an impressive abstraction. Thanks for letting us see it.
The photographer is Tom Quinn. This is titled Inner Light.
This photograph is like someone deconstructed a rainbow and danced in the dark with the pieces of it. It's truly something new and contains several elements that draw a viewer in. There's the glowing ice planet from orbit of the upper left, the green grounding along the bottom, and the remarkable brush of red in the upper right, all framed in a fine composition. This
Maker? Oh, sorry. Keep going, Chris.
Not done yet, sorry. This is abstraction at its finest. There's a little red pixel on the right side. It's a little bit hard to see in the zoom view. I was trying to do, it looks like a misfired pixel on the camera, and I was trying to decide if it were my photo, whether I'd leave it in or not. And I think I decided I'd take it out so the photo wouldn't be about it if someone saw it. But that's just a small little literal nitpick in the photo. This is definitely an image I'd submit for juried shows.
Sorry. If you take a breath, forget it. That was by Fred Finney. And this is Blackbirds Flying.
So this makes an interesting photo for an abstract category. I can see why you put it in abstract, although all of its elements aren't actually abstract. So, you know, more discussion. But taking it as it is, I think you've ended up with a nice image. The reflection of the sky and the leaves floating in the water, the branch, the birds. If it's a little crunchy, it looks like it lost a little technical quality translation. But if you have a technically good picture, I think this makes a nice presentation to put up on a wall. There are some things you'd want to clean up in the far upper left corner. I think it would be good to get rid of that little corner of a leaf. And then those white marks look like mistakes rather than part of the picture. So I would clean those up. And then you've got a nice picture.
And that is by Eleni Prusa. Our next category, obviously, since we've come to it, is architecture. And the first photo is titled Rock House Through Arch.
I love using architectural elements as frames in my own photography, especially with stone structures like castles. The composition of this photograph is excellent and leads the viewer through the arch to the stone house within. I think it could be improved with some selective burning and dodging, however. Kathy, next photo, please. The original is on the left and my suggestions are on the right. I think you want the focus to be on the steps in the house, not on the outer arch. By darkening the foreground part of the arch and lightening the house and grass, I hope my suggested changes help improve an already good photograph. Thanks for giving this window into the world.
The maker is Gary Kartstaffner. This is Bodhi Reflection.
There's a lot to explore in this picture. The wood it looks like I can reach out and touch it and I can feel it. So I like that. And then you decided to include the vertical board on the left, so the window shifted right. And I think your composition works. I think that's a good choice. And then the reflection of, it's the second row down, middle one, that looks liquid compared to the rest of the reflections, which is pretty intriguing. And then the tattered curtain adds a lot. There's just a lot to explore in this picture. And the lighting is well done, nice and even for this. Nice.
The photographer is Mike Shea. This is Roofs Reykjavik.
Wow, I love those red walls. The buildings in this image are well composed. The tile on the roof in the lower right echoes the stone building in the background across a diagonal, and the sharp pyramid peak of the left red wall plays well against the round curve of the right red wall, with the windows forming a nice bluish anchoring grid. There are several things that bother me about this image, however. The sky is a strange sort of aqua color, probably because the camera chose a white balance based on the red, and there's a big dust spot near the top of the frame. I also think the image has an overall bluish hue. Next image, please, Kathy. On the suggested image on the right, I've cropped the sky and darkened it and changed it to a more natural bluish hue. I also use a temperature slider in Photoshop to warm up the image a little bit, which has the side effect of making the red walls glow even redder. These are minor suggestions to an already fine image.
The maker is Jerry Thomas. Our next category is fauna, and our first image is Horse with Snow Geese.
I smiled when I saw this one. This is like a fairy tale setting for a photographer. Beautiful horse, beautiful birds in flight, birds on the water. Too bad the fence is there, but I know you can't arrange to have the fence be gone. I like your composition. The horse is pretty extremely down low left, but I think it works nicely in this picture. Good exposure, lighting. There are a couple tiny little spots on the horse, one on his neck that I would spot out to make the horse look smoother and more engaging. So those are all the comments. Nice photo.
The photographer is Craig Rorson. The next image is Stonefly Husk.
This is a great capture of something that's too small to see in detail when we visit riverbanks. The photographer has chosen a nice diagonal composition, and all parts of the husk are in good focus. I love the little strand of innards snaking out of the split back, illustrating the emergence after the metamorphosis. About the only suggestion I make is to try vignetting in order to frame the image a little more on the bug. Thanks for sharing.
And the photographer was Jimmy Marchio. This next photo is Clamshell Hideaway.
I love this photo. I love the blue-green palette it has overall, and then the clean color of the octopus and the shell. And when I first saw it, I got to enjoy it for maybe a second without realizing what I was looking at. And then I got to enjoy the octopus. I like the octopus's little beauty mark of a little tiny sea star on its cheek. And I like the photographer's composition, the choice of positioning within the frame. I think this is successful on every level. I love it.
The photographer is Mark Davis. This is titled Right Back at You.
We've seen a lot of fine bird images here in the club, but this one stands out to me because it's a view we haven't seen before, which is something I always like to encourage. The composition is superb, with the placement of the long neck in the frame and plumage drifting off to the left in the breeze. Or maybe it's my imagination that the bird has just snapped its head to look at the photographer and the feathers are flying outward from that movement. The blurred sticks in the lower left are a nice inclusion too, and the muted color palette is wonderful. This photo is art meeting evolution. See how the eyes have a downward angle to them? I'm guessing this bird spends a lot of time standing in the water looking down for food. Wow, nice shot.
And the artist is Rachel Rosenthal. This is titled Focus.
Very interesting photo. It's very vivid, very 3D. The bird is all sharp. The background is all blurry except the stick in the upper left corner. And I'll just be honest, I wondered if the bird was pasted in, but I know that's not in this category. But then I explored the claws of the bird, and there is like a previous background in the bird's claws. So just setting that aside, I think it makes a striking image. The even lighting and the sharpness of the bird, it's just, what a striking image this is. Nicely done.
The photographer is Brian Dunbar. This is Calusa Refuge Siesta.
The waterfall in this photo look like they're living on a tiny asteroid that we might call Planet Duck, with a dead plant seemingly an array of radio antennas to capture the latest transmissions from far off Earth. The photographer has achieved this otherworldly effect by isolating the scene from any context. Although the image is sharp, the low angle sunlight, calm water, and the low contrast of the ducks gives this image a dreamlike quality. The effect is helped by the photographer darkening the bottom portion of the image. I love how the configuration of dead plants is such that they are not a perfect mirror image above and below. Thanks for sharing this nice photo with us.
The photographer is Jonathan Beth. This is Bluebird.
Nice positioning within the frame. I love the positioning. I love the bird's body language, and the head, cocked head, gives this picture a lot of personality. The lighting is low lighting coming from the viewer's right. Now it looks nice against the dark background. These things were all handled well. This picture, unfortunately, is not sharp, and these pictures are hard to get. So maybe this was pretty close to sharpness, but not quite. So other than the sharpness, I think you have a very successful image. I would crop slightly off the left and bottom to get rid of the bright spots along the left and bottom, but that's a small detail.
All right, that's by Sheila Ryan Weintraub. This is deer herd grazing.
I love the shaggy winter coats on the deer and the alert, ready to spring into action stare of that front deer and the big ears of the deer in the back looking in the other directions. The photographer has captured a moment of tension here. The photo seems to say that there are threats all around, and in a moment they could be off in a burst of springing speed. The deer on the far left is a little distracting to me and pulls my eye away from the main subjects of the photograph. Next photo, please, Kathy. I tried cropping off the whole left of the photo and made it into a vertical composition, and to my eye, it's a more interesting framing of the subjects. I also added a little vignetting to focus more on the deer and darken the foreground plant litter. Thanks for bringing us this nice scene.
And the maker is Jeff Alstatter. This is the king.
This is a beautifully done photo. The even lighting is just perfect for this subject. The framing, I love the framing, the balance of the picture, the composition. The lower left corner is obviously some grass that was really in the picture, but it looks like a bright square. And so it does interrupt my enjoyment of this picture. I would darken that down a little. And of course, anyone would love to go shoo off those flies, but that's not part of the deal here. So given that and the texture of the mane, you can run your fingers through that mane. It's amazing. So I think it's a very successful photograph with what the scene the photographer took and ended up with this picture. It's a good job.
The photographer is Janice Rossner. This is, I didn't realize river otters were so big, 4 feet.
The photographer has chosen a nice composition for this photo, leaving a lot of room on the right side of the frame for the otter to move into. The otter's body and the sloping rocks form a nice diagonal, and the photographer has used vignetting to focus us in on the otter. I'd love to be able to see the eye of the otter better, and it looks like the photographer tried hard to bring it out of the shadows. The photo also has an overall unnatural greenish cast that I was able to correct with the tint slider in Lightroom, moving it over toward magenta a little. Otters are generally seen as cute and frolicky, but this is a nice change of perspective to see another side of them. This is a great capture.
And the photographer is Ann Wessling.
This is an uncommon view of a common something.
Oh, I'm sorry, uncommon view of common English sparrow. Just tell me I forgot something.
Yeah, I like the composition. I like the positioning within the frame. And again, strong side lighting from the viewer's right, nice catch light in the bird's eye. And it looks like the wind is ruffling up his feathers. That brings another dimension to the photo. And the title is fun. It's a little muted in all of its colors. I think I would have been tempted to just bring up saturation just a little bit to make it more engaging in that level. Everything else works though. Nice picture.
The photographer is Ann Wessling. This is On the Hunt in Kenya.
This is a stunning photograph. I never think to use reverse vignetting, but this photo is a perfect example of what I might be missing. It's a really effective technique and combines focusing us on the main elements and also adds a vintage feel to the image. There is little that's not perfect about this photograph, and it's combined with the serendipity of capturing the kitten when it's posed spectacularly beside and underneath the adult. This is the kind of photo that everyone who goes to Africa dreams about capturing. At this point, I'm just going to keep talking so we have a few more seconds to look at this truly smashing photograph. Wowee.
Well, then I'm sure the photographer Bernadette Sylvester will appreciate that.
Nice.
This is titled Woolly Caterpillar.
Very woolly. This is a nice photo. It's got a lot of good things. I love the vivid orange of the caterpillar and the long hair. It looks almost playful by our standards. Being human beings who like to anthropomorphize, I wish there was something that said a little bit more about a head or a face, but the critter is what the critter is. I might crop just a little bit off the left. It's a little bright and there's more dead material over there. everything else makes this good photo. I love the green, orange, white, and black. I think that's really cool. Nice.
And the photographer is Dave Connell. And that ends that category, and we're going into flora. The first photo in flora is titled Mossy Trees.
I personally love this photograph. It's exactly the kind of scene that I seek out and try to capture myself. It's natural and everything in it is obvious, but it's also abstract and beautiful. It's different from your run-of-the-mill fall foliage photo. The photographer obviously chose the camera position to line up the tree trunks just so, and frame the composition to capture the trunks and leaves as if framing a person's head and hair. It works on so many levels for me that I want to see it be as good as possible. Next photo, please, Kathy. My suggestion for improving this photo is the bottom image. I darken the left side and along the bottom and brighten the center of the image to keep my eye more focused there. I also increase the saturation in the center to increase interest in that area. Personally, I think it brings out a glow in the center and makes a great photo shine a little bit brighter.
And the photographer is Sheila Ryan Weintraub. Okay. This is titled A Burst of Red.
What a stunning and vivid photo. I love it. The black background and the bright flower, the nice lighting you chose. My constructive criticism is it feels like the flower is too low in the frame for me. I'd like to see less space above and more space below. And that's it. Everything else about this is so successful. The sharpness is exciting. Nice.
The photographer is Patricia O'Connor. This is titled Dried Hydrangeas Clippings.
My first thought when this image came up before I looked at the title was Butterfly Hive or maybe Flower Planet. This is a sensational photo and the muted color palette is really appealing. The photographer obviously chose the positioning and color of the petals and leaves for artistic intent. It's like two works of art, the original arrangement and the photograph. The short stem at the bottom right is a perfect little touch. The lighting and background are well chosen too. What a great photograph.
The photographer is Mike Shea. We are now into the category of natural landscape. And our first photograph is titled Redwood's Evening Light.
I enjoy this photo. This subject is usually too high in contrast, and this photographer managed it well. And if this is a nice, delicately low contrast photo, it makes it so pleasing. And then the trees, the perspective of the picture, the trees are all straight up and down. That's another pleasing characteristic to this picture. The mist is yet another layer to this picture that's pleasing. I think this one works really well. I have no constructive criticism for this image.
This photo is by Henry Goodman. This is titled Thunder River.
I've stood near where this photograph was taken, so I know how difficult photography in Grand Canyon can be with the midday light. The photographer created a remarkable image under those challenging conditions. I love the choice of panoramic composition so that the Thunder River Spring can be included along with the winding canyon of Tapeats Creek in the distance. The clouds were also cooperating to make a very fine photograph indeed. Thanks for sharing it with us.
And the photographer is Brian Dunbar. This next photo is titled After the Storm on Convict Lake.
And like the redwoods, this strikes me as a very delicate photo with low contrast levels, which makes it very pleasing. The sky is dramatic, but this looks to me like a beautiful painted landscape that one might see hanging in your living room. I have no constructive criticisms. I just enjoy all the different colors and the sweep of the mountains and the drama of the sky. I think it was all well handled. Nice.
And the photographer is Bill Wages. This photo is titled Dusk on Badwater Salt Pans.
We've seen a lot of pictures with a similar composition from Death Valley before, but this photograph gives a unique view because of the way the foreground elements have been featured. The ridges look like coral growths or maybe mountain ranges on an icy moon of Jupiter. The photographer has used burning, dodging, and vignetting skillfully to emphasize the bright salt at the center of the image, keeping our eyes focused there on the most important elements. This is a wonderful photograph, but there's something funny going on in the upper left and upper right, just below the horizon line. There are ghostly patterns showing through either from sensor noise or some other post-processing artifact. If these could be corrected, the photograph would be even better. Thanks for sharing.
The photographers, George Pelpel. This is titled Hope Valley Waterhouse Peak.
I like the panoramic choice for framing. Composition's nice, the color palette's nice, the exposure's nice. I think the picture is about the yellow trees. They're intriguing and beautiful. The lighter straw-colored yellow field in the foreground steals a little bit of their thunder. I might try to darken that down a little bit. The sky looks like you may have darkened it. It looks very nice the way you did that. So perhaps the foreground can be darkened a little too. And I think you've got a successful picture.
And the photographer is Jimmy Marchio. This is titled Snow-Covered Bonsai Rock.
Snow-covered granite boulders at Lake Tahoe, sunset sunbeams, curvy human form sunbanks, misty distant lake shores. Hooray! There are many, many things to like about this photo. It's also got sharp focus front to back, and it's a different view of bonsai rock than I've seen before. It's effective on many levels. When I look at the left quarter of the picture, however, there's not much going on over there, and there's not much that's a critical element besides the snow on the sunbank. Next image, please, Kathy. I would be tempted to crop off the left side to trim the photo down to all the goodness that's going on over on the right side. To my eye, this crop makes for a more cohesive, interesting image, but your mileage may vary. Either way, it's a great shot.
And the photographer is John Sievert. This photo is titled Sunset Serenity.
This is a nice example of approaching a subject and doing it with a gentle touch and coming out with a really successful picture. I love the birds in the foreground, the birds in the sky up above. I love the overall color cast of the picture. I love the framing and the composition. I think it's a very successful picture. I have no constructive criticisms for this one. Nice.
The photographer is Lori Woodhull. This photo is titled The Tree Before the Forest.
This photo reached out and grabbed me the instant it appeared on my screen. The high contrast of the lower portion of the photo with very effective dodging of the winter bare tree makes for a striking image. But the tree alone wouldn't work without the soft, subtle trees and clouds included in the top of the image. It's almost like a nighttime image with the white tree light painted. It has a feel of being on the edge of night and something dramatic is going to take place. Very nice image.
The photographer is Jim Bear. This photo is titled Tree Over the Yuba.
So I think you're on to a really good idea here. I love the colors. I love the blue-gray rocks and the cool greens and warm greens in both the tree and the water and the tans. And your composition is good. The unfortunate part about this picture is your camera focused right in the center foreground on those dead stalks of grass and the rock, that large rock. So the rest of the picture is a little bit out of focus. So with that, if you can go back and get it the focus different, I think you've got a really successful picture. The reflection of the sky coming through, this is all a very pleasing picture and all those other aspects.
And the photographer is Eleni Prusa. This is Full Comb Out.
The photographer is playing nicely with textures and colors in this image. There's a fade from soft browns to icy blues as our eyes move from bottom to top in the photograph. There's also a dreamy quality to the lower part of the image that fades to crispness in the upper clouds. The centrally placed tree makes it the focus of the image, but it's almost like an apparition hovering there reflected. This photograph has a painterly feel to it, especially in the reflected reeds, and is quite pleasing. Very nice.
And the photographer is Kathy Triolo. This is titled Remnants of the Past.
So the preface is into the splitting hairs category. This to me seems to be a little more of a man-made thing than a natural landscape, but I could definitely see why you put it natural landscape, so I won't worry about that. Given that, I think you've got a really nice picture. It's got a very peaceful quality to it. I like the panoramic framing. I like the shutter speed you chose with the water. And yeah, just the softness works for me. The little technical criticism is there's 2 sensor spots in the upper left center of the picture that should have been spotted out, and you might still need to get your sensor cleaned. Rest of it's nice picture, and then the soft lighting too also works for me. Nice.
And the photographer is Rachel Rosenthal, and that ends natural landscape. And now we are heading into night photography. The first photo is moon setting at Point Arena.
We can identify each piece of this photograph if we think about them, but when it's all assembled together, it becomes a dreamscape of imagination. This photograph took advanced skills, both in the field and in post-processing, to make it all work together. Everything about it is sensational, but the most astonishing elements to me are the moonlit paths of light through the surf and haystack rocks. This is as close to a perfect image as a photographer can come, but it's so much more than just pressing a button. It took vision and preparation and execution. And again, mostly I'm just continuing to talk so that we can admire this photograph for a few more seconds. Mostly I'm speechless.
And the maker who will thank you, Chris, is Eric Ingalls. Our next photo, Bunting and the Milky Way. Bunting and Milky Way.
Yeah, nice photo. And for those who haven't tried to get stars and Milky Way down, getting it down by the horizon to look this good is hard to do. And this is beautiful in this photo. The composition is nice. There's a balance to it. The Milky Way is part of the segment, and the building, and then the wagon in the middle is a nice little detail. And the photographer got the light far off to the right of the camera, which I think was successful. And it made the left side of the building go into shadow, and that helps with the composition. So yeah, no constructive criticism. This is a nice photo.
The photographer is Fred Finney, and that ends night photography. And now we head into people. The first photograph is titled Soft Beauties, Chiapas, Mexico.
One of the great things about this image is that without the title, it could be a mother and child from any of a number of countries in the Americas or Asia. The composition is excellent, and it looks like the photographer has used selective burning to darken the background so that our eyes stay centered on the faces. It looks like the camera focused on the women's shoulder instead of her face, so the faces are a little bit soft. I'd be tempted to apply selective sharpening of at least the eyes, if not the whole faces, to improve the image. The photo also looks a little bit warm in terms of white balance, and when I slid the temperature slider in Lightroom a little toward blue, I thought the image looked a little better and a little cleaner. But these are minor suggestions for an already excellent image.
And the photographer is Ed Sylvester. This next photo is titled Sensing the Look.
Oh, there's my friends, Hart and Cosmo. Really fun photo. Fun composition, fun focus, a lot of burning in the background, but I think that helps the photo quite a bit. And I like the title because it could be applying to either one. Either one could be sensing the look of the other. And yeah, nice photo. No constructive criticism. I think it stands on its own really well.
The photographer is Jim Baer. This is titled Pakistani Border.
Here's a scene that is new to my eyes. The photographer has captured the exuberance of youth with all of its smiles and smudged faces that Steve McCurry might pass right on by. We get a taste of the culture in what I'm guessing are school uniforms and the innocence of allowing hijabs to slip off heads. It even looks like moms trim bangs with scissors in a bowl in Pakistan, just like my mom used to do. The photographer has used vignetting to effectively reduce distractions around the edges. This is a great little photograph that is well executed.
The photographer is Jay Schuff. And that ends people. And we have one in photojournalism. It is titled The Places He Has Been, the Places He Will Go.
Oh, okay. When I saw this earlier, this was in people. I like this in photojournalism. This gives a feeling of somebody who's a very serious adventurer, traveler. I see the dirty fingernails, and it talks about the clothing he chooses, the backpack, the camelback, and I'm honestly reevaluating with it not being in people, but now photojournalism, which I like better. I like the position of the hands within the frame. So yeah, nicely done.
And the photographer is Anna Woodhull. Now we're into travel, which we all wish we would do. This is titled Church of St. George, Lalibela, Ethiopia. Hope I said that right.
It's almost impossible to judge scale in this photograph. Without the image title, at first, it looks like this might just be a small grave marker, but then details start to emerge, like the water spouts off the roof and the realization that the portal in the lower right is actually a full-size window. It's old and it's foreign to my eyes, and that makes it interesting to me. The image might be improved by darkening the lower left foreground since there's nothing essential going on there and its brightness distracts from the main image. Thanks for taking us on your travels with this image.
The image is by Ed Sylvester. This is titled Machu Picchu, Sacha or Saka, not sure which one.
So this is a beautiful scene that this photographer recorded. What I'm seeing here is a photo that's got some technical problems. It's broken up a little bit, maybe over sharpened. So that's unfortunate, but setting that aside, the framing, the composition is really nice. The balance is nice. I love the mist featuring the tree. I love the mist hiding the mountains, the lights and the darks. I love the figures on the left, setting some scale and providing another dimension. So I love a lot of things about this picture, except the technical quality didn't come through to this point. So maybe that could be fixed.
And the photographer is Gary Wade. This photo is titled Venice.
We get everything we expect in this image, and even without the title, there is only one place in the world this could be. Therefore, the photographer has succeeded in capturing an effective photograph of the place. We get the canal and the iconic boats and the stone buildings that make Venice, Venice, all in one excellent composition. One suggestion that might make it better is to increase the overall saturation of the image since it seems slightly washed out, but overall it's an excellent image.
The photographer is Michael Quinn. This photo is titled Sahara Desert Climb.
Yeah, definitely a travel picture. This photo has a little bit of an awkward composition. There's a lot of no man's land between the people and the camels and then the sun, and those are the main elements of the picture. And I can see, obviously, the photographer couldn't just jump off the camel and run to the left or the right to change that. But what the photographer could have done is left a little more space to the left and the right, and then it would feel like these elements are relating to each other in a more pleasing way compositionally. That being said, the rest of it's great. The sand dunes and the camels, it really takes you away to another place. Nice.
This photo is by Patricia O'Connor. And now we are into creative fantasy, anything goes. The first title is My Lover Has My Back, 1992, San Francisco.
The photographer is trying to tell a story with this photograph, and the title is part of that story. We see stasis and movement of bodies outdoors and in front of a cottage. One possibility is that something from the photographer's memory interpreted through this photograph sparks something in our own memory. The scene is well composed with human forms and the details on the outside of the house well placed and balanced. The black and white tonality is superb, and there are no distracting elements. This is a very fine photograph that makes us pause and ponder.
The photographer is Shelby Cohen. This is titled Baby in Deer Creek.
This is a very intriguing picture. I feel like the photographer's playing with me in a good way. The yellow leaves on the rocks in the left and lower left are bright colors. They're light, they're intricate, and so my attention goes there first. And then I go over to explore the whitewater, and I discover the delight of seeing it's actually a composite photo with some figures in the white water. So that makes this picture really fun with lots of layers to explore. I think the composition is good, and the lighting, everything, all those technical details are handled well. The way the second image was placed in on the right side, it blends really well. On the left side, there's a little bit of a firm line that I wish could have been blended a little more. And then I wondered if what's inside the whitewater looks like it's fully black and white. And I was wondering if it could have had a cooler cast to match the whitewater better. Nice.
That was by Shelby Cohen. So this is Multi-Dance Abstraction.
I get the impression that the photographer had a vision for this photograph, perhaps inspired by Ellen Davis's landscape montages, and worked to successfully execute that vision in the studio. I'm guessing this montage was done in post-processing, but it's possible that it was done in camera, and if so, I tip my hat to the photographer. This is an impressive photograph when seen up close on the screen, but it gets even better if I get up and take a step or two back in the room. Doing that, the overall impression of movement increases and the central brighter area becomes even more of a human landscape. Note how the photographer lightened the central area to keep our eyes circulating there when it's not taking a turn through the faces. The literal crowning glory of this photo is the one hand raised above the crowd, and it borders on genius. Wow, what a great image.
The maker is Douglas Hooper. This is The Sky is the Limit.
This is a really fun treatment of trying different things in photography. I love it. And the title goes well with this image. I like it. And as I explored it and enjoyed all 9 of the sky images, I perceive 7 of them to be dramatic and 2 of them to be gentle. And the photographer put the 2 gentle ones in the center and then the one just to the left. And that makes me wonder why and how they all go together. And I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's all nicely done. It's fun to explore this picture. Nice.
And the maker of this is Ingrid Lockhart. This is A Profound Exception to the Sea of Darkness.
I love that title and how it fits the visuals of the photograph. This image also looks like it was envisioned by the photographer in advance and skillfully executed in the studio. The lighting suggests that light painting was used with a very long shutter speed. Note how the shadows are too well placed to be accidental. We don't get to see the model's face, and that is intentional. The religious undertones of the image are likely meant to challenge our sensibilities, and this too is one of the functions of art. The ambiguities are part of what makes this a compelling photograph. Thanks for sharing.
The artist is Douglas Hooper. This is called The Portal.
This is a fun photo you've put together here. I like it. It's got a lot of things to explore. The foreground, most of the foreground is black and white, except for down in the lower foreground. If I was thinking about this, if you left that part color, this could actually go in manipulated but realistic. It would be believable. So I love the mist, like the trees. And then there's like a barren landscape, and you can go through all sorts of stories in your mind. Like maybe you landed on another planet and there's rocks out there, and the water looks polluted, which is another level to this picture. It looks to me like it's leaning slightly to the left. I would rotate it slightly clockwise to make it feel balanced. And everything else about it's an intriguing photo. Nice.
And the artist is Dave McClellan. This is titled Ruffled Up.
Immediately we see this image in a painterly light. We've got the frame that looks like a mat, and we've got a canvas textured background with misty brush strokes. This is a pelican like I've never seen before, heroic and sunlit with a blue penetrating gaze. Look at how those feet grip the rocks like a pelagic Hercules tense to take flight from a coastal Olympus. The composition is striking and the execution is spectacular. Every feather is perfect in the same way that the guano on the rocks is nicely imperfect. Well done and bravo.
And thank you from the artist, Kathy Triolo. Our next category, manipulated but realistic. The first photo is titled America at 75 miles per hour.
And I believe you. This is a good picture. I like, you just simply got four elements. You've got the sky, the cloud, the rock, and the green hillside foreground. And I think you've assembled them really well. Composition is so satisfying. And I like the smooth, even lighting. As I studied the picture, constructive criticism, there's a line where apparently some skies were blended together, a vertical line in the upper left edge of the border there. You might want to fix that. And I'm seeing banding. On my computer, I saw a little bit. In this image, I'm seeing even more banding in the sky. It might be a little detail to work on. But your artistic concept is great. I think you came up with something really good here. Nice.
And the artist is Ingrid Lockhart. This is titled Showering Roses.
As you've heard me say before, I like to compliment views I haven't seen before, and this is definitely one of them. The splash of water on the female model's head is perfectly captured and expertly lit to fill the air with spray against a black background. The concept of adding roses is creative, although I would have liked to see them blended better into the underlying image. Overall, a very nice photograph.
The artist is Jonathan Beff. The title of this is Follow the Way.
Again, another nice photo. I like the title. I like the yellow leaf, I think is perhaps what the title's about. And I like the leaf is pausing or hesitating before going on with its journey. And then as you look to see where its journey leads it, there's three whirlpools. They don't look threatening though. They look like friendly whirlpools. So it's a fun picture, lots to explore and think about. And the lighting is good. The composition is good. Nice.
The maker is Ellen Davis. We are now into black and white, and the first is titled Spectacular Lenticular.
And that certainly is a spectacular lenticular for which the photographer has found a matching landscape to ground it. The Little Rock spire is a nice echo to the descending anti-spire of the cloud formation. The photographer achieves a nice black and white tonality with this photograph and effectively uses darkening along the bottom and possibly vignetting to keep our eyes in the frame. Unfortunately, the bright and broad white cloud band in the upper left of the photograph tends to pull my eye away from the more interesting elements at the center of the photo. Next image, please, Kathy. So I tried darkening the upper left cloud as shown in the right suggested modification. The original is on the left. I also lightened other parts of the main central cloud formation, and to my eye, this improves the photograph and keeps my eyes circulating on the best parts of this remarkable photograph.
And the photographer is Eric Ingalls. This is titled Lost in Thought.
I would end up with this picture. This is a Burning Man sculpture I photographed at Burning Man and at the Oakland Museum. So I love it. I love it already. The photographer handled this really well with the figure, the silhouetted figure in the foreground adds a nice dimension to the photo. And I like the title. That also enhances the photo for me. And then the reflections on the wall and floor are really cool. So no constructive criticism. Really, I did consider cropping a little bit off the left. For me, it balanced slightly better that way, but that's splitting hairs. Small point. Nice.
And the photographer is Jerry Thomas. This is Light Under the Washroom Door.
This is a really fun picture. It made me smile because I've seen this at some point in my life. I've seen this myself. I think this is really cool that you photographed it, and very successfully too. It communicates well When now that it's against an all black background, it doesn't show against, but I would bring the left border in just a little because of the large, strong element on the right. That balanced the picture a little bit better for me. And that was the only constructive criticism I could come up with. I like this photo. It's cool.
The photographer is Michael Quinn. This is titled Tahoe Winter.
This wind-blown scene makes me shiver a little with the drifted snow and the white-capped lake in the background. The white speckles in the dark part of the dock lead me to think this picture was taken through a window or a glass door, but I like the effect that this gives, almost like sun sparkles. The snow in the lower left part of the image has a very gray look to me rather than the expected bright white of snow in full sunlight. And I'm not sure that the left part of the image contributes much to the photo anyway, so I tried cropping it off. Next photo, please, Kathy.
I don't think I have that one. I'm sorry. I do not have the second one in this.
Okay, well then we'll imagine cropping off the left and brightening the snow in the lower left to make it look more like bright snow might be. Thanks for sharing this nice winter scene.
And the photographer is Gary Wade. This is titled Wind and Sand.
A nice photo of the sand dunes, and this one's a little different with all the foot tracks going across the ridge of the dune. You control the tones very well. There's some light grays, meal grays, dark grays. I think your composition actually works for me. It's the center of interest is right in the center, called bullseyeing, and that's usually not a good idea, but I think it works in this one. And for what it's worth, I did envision it with a lot of the right side cut off, a full third or so, and the left side. And I think you've got successful photos with those croppings as well. So perhaps 3 successful pictures out of this one. Nice photo.
The photographer is Mark Triolo. This is titled Reflecting on Donner Lake.
There are several nice aspects of this photo to point out. It's a reflection photo, but the photographer has wisely chosen not to split the frame 50-50 with the horizon. The photographer has also captured beautiful clouds that, when reflected in the water, get visually mixed in with the stones of the lake bottom. That's very nice. This is mountain photography at its finest. The photographer increased the contrast of the image and darkened the blue of the sky to add drama and emphasize the texture of the snow on the trees. Finally, it looks like the photographer used vignetting to help frame the image. Unfortunately, on my monitor, the image looks a little bit bright to me. Do you have a suggested image, Kathy?
I certainly do.
I darkened the overall image, and I thought it increased the richness of tones, and it made me like this photograph even more. It could just be monitor calibration, though. This is a great black and white image. I love it.
And the photographer is Bill Wages. This is titled Maple on Moss.
What a beautiful image. This is black and white at its best. The very light leaf and the very dark moss, and then whether it was natural or done through dodging and burning, the lighter areas of the moss keep the viewer's eyes comfortably in the middle of the picture. So I like a lot of things about this picture. There's a couple little extra bright spots in the lower right corner. There's a very bright white spot I might take out. Tiny comment for a very successful picture. I like this one. Nice.
And the photographer is Chris Schiller. This is titled Man from Another World.
Wow, this is a case study in fine art black and white photography. It's got rich blacks and glowing whites and a full range of gray tones in between. The composition is spectacular, with a glowing dune in the lower left on the diagonal with a peaked dune and person in the upper right. It's got dune bushes throwing long shadows for our eyes to explore. The timing of the photograph is perfect to capture those shadows. And then there are the mysterious happenings going on at the top of the image that look like the world gets bent and mixed into a cloudy sky with stairways to another plane of existence. It's all dunes, of course, but it's glorious. This would be a striking photograph without the human figure, but with the figure, it's devastating. Well done, both in the field and with burning and dodging and post-processing.
And the photographer is Janice Rostner. Our next category is color. The first is titled Bubble Bloom.
I think this is a delightful picture. I was surprised by it, but I realized, yeah, bubbles really could be sitting on those plants. This is fun. We have the dimension of silhouettes in the bubble. The rainbows are great. It kind of creates its own color palette. And then the lighting was well chosen for a photograph like this. I see that you, the photographer, heavily vignetted the top of the picture, and that's good thinking. It brings the viewer's eye down to the bubbles. The bottom is either naturally dark or got vignetted as well. The top could have actually been cropped off a little and you still maintain the balance of the picture, and that might make the vignetting across the top a little easier. But the bubbles are so delightful, that definitely carries the picture. Nice.
The photographer is Lori Woodhull. This is titled Crystalline Gold, Di Maria Mine.
This is a well-lit, well-executed photograph. The photographer chose the blue base fading into a black background to complement and emphasize the tones of gold. They positioned the nugget to maybe suggest an animal form or something alive. This is a nice modern depiction of the substance that brought us the history of the area where we live, the gold country. But speaking for myself, it's something we don't see very often. In this case, all that glitters is gold. Thanks for sharing.
The photographer is Mark Davis. This photograph is titled Hands of Buddha.
So this is nice to see the hands cradling the natural objects. It's pleasing in that way. And the photographer was thinking about the composition, getting the hands kind of centered and then the natural objects a little off to the right. Makes it more compositionally interesting. I do wish the far right pine cone that its tip was still included. And then the left side of the picture gets kind of light and vague. And because it's light, my attention goes over there. I think I would have darkened the upper left and mid left a little bit more so that the viewer's attention goes back to what the hands are cradling, because I think that's what the photo's about. But I like the way you went in so close on this. That's a nice treatment. Nice.
The photographer is Patricia Leviton. This next photo is titled Nevada City Side Yard Show.
This is a beautiful photograph capturing fall colors. The photographer chose the perfect day when some trees were still green, but others were fully in bloom, and when there wasn't direct sunlight on the scene. I love the variety of shades from yellow to orange and purple and magenta. I think the inclusion of a few tree trunks keeps the image from being too abstract. Thanks for sharing this beauty with us.
The photographer is Henry Goodman. This photo is titled Sunset at Egret Cove.
So I like this picture. I like the composition and the almost square framing. I like the color palette of it. Those golds and oranges are wonderful with a little bit of splashes of turquoise and green coming through. The egret, which is obviously the center of interest, looks like he's having a hard time balancing on that kelp and is a little ruffled, and as a result, which kind of makes the picture have a different mood than one might expect. The white is a wonderful, striking contrast against everything else. It's just the askew wing feathers are kind of amusing for a scene like this. But I love the picture. I think it came out really well.
The photographer is Tom Quinn, and that ends color. We have one last category, the not critiqued category. Thank you, gentlemen. And the one entry is Horsetail Falls. And this photo is by Rick Ashelman. Just one note that it's about this time that people are gathering up at Horsetail Falls right now. I understand. It's quite a crowd. And thank you very much, Rick, for entering this beautiful photo. And that ends our show for tonight. So back to you, Rachel.
All right. So thank you, Kathy. What a night. Excellent speaker. Critique. You guys were very timely. Well done.
Boy, I can't believe how they just zoomed through all of those images.
They
You
did.
guys,
I was
amazing.
9 o'clock, my computer says. Nailed it.
They did.
Nicely done. And so everybody, our next meeting is March 22nd. Same number as this month. So March 22nd. And looking forward to seeing everybody then. And with that, that ends our meeting tonight. So thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.